Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Cabbage Head Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Rabbit Deku Becomes Vigilante? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. On the rooftops of Muzutafu in the depths of night, a single person was standing on a roof, his silhouettes casting a shadow down to the street below with the only light illuminating him, and the world was the full moon behind him. Now just what kind of things will happen here tonight? The figure asked himself, his voice coming off as deep and intimidating with a slight electronic sound to it. What do we have here? The person said, watching as a small group of people walked into a nearby alleyway. Well now, forgot to send me an invitation to their little party, have we? Let's see if it's something to have a fit about, he said while following them from the roof. As the figure caught up to the group, he immediately let out a tired sigh. Another set of muggers and a woman. I'm gonna need some new blades after this, he said, jumping down to the street below where he grabbed onto a fire escape to descend to the ground silently as to not startle the group of thugs. As he made it to the ground and snuck up to the group, he could clearly see there were 5 guys there, each of them having different elemental-based quirks. Lady, just give us the purse, one of the muggers demanded. Yeah, and maybe after having some fun, before we'll let you go, another mugger said as he started to burn a part of the woman's clothes. Please, stop. Somebody please. Help me. The woman begged as she started to cry. All the while the person who was seeking up on them was watching and heard everything while patiently waiting for an opening for him to strike as he got closer. So, you're all a sex offender as well, huh? I'm gonna use your heads as a new baseball, he thought, as if it was some fact rather than a threat. As the group of men surrounded the woman ready to do who knows what with her, 3 of the men suddenly felt a pressure on their necks and fainted. What the? The remaining 2 thugs yelled, feeling intense pain in their shoulders and legs. They looked to see what caused this, only to see kunais impaled in their flesh. They looked around to see who threw them and saw the person. He was wearing a black helmet that completely covered his whole head with a heavily tinted black visor. On each side of the helmet there were what looked to be flashlight attached. 2 emerald green protrusions stuck up from the helmet like a pair of bunny ears. He wore a green hoodie underneath a black leather vest. 2 black leather pauldrons hung from his shoulders with a brown leather strap going across his chest to a satchel that hung from his left hip while a sword hung from the right. His arms were protected by metal plates that served some function. His right arm had a screen that was connected to the internet. His other arm had what looked like a rectangular device that stuck out a bit, which was actually a capable shield attached to his arm. He wore black gloves that if one were to look closer could see it can run an electrical current through it like a taser. Finally on his thighs was a pistol and a knife. He wore 2 green metal boots with a shin guard to protect his knees while the back of his knees were counseled behind a butt cape. Who the hell are you and what do you think you're doing? Ah God, this hurts. The man yelled, pulling out one of the kunais. I go by many names around here. Edgelords call me Nightwalker, one pro hero calls me Problem Child, but most call me Rabbit. Mainly because of the ear antenna. As for what I'm doing, I'm taking you and your fellow SX offender friends down, the now named Rabbit stated, blocking a swing from one of the men. He drew a telescopic baton from his satchel and brought it down onto the thug's collarbone before knocking him out. You bastard! I'll F you up! The other thug yelled, sending a line of ice towards the man. Rabbit sidestepped the ice and dashed forward to make a grab at the ice quirk user's arm, as a result sending the electrical current from his glove through the man, knocking him out. Now for you 3, Rabbit stated, seeing the remaining thugs back up. You're gonna die, right here a hole? The 3 remaining thugs yelled as they all readied themselves to blast fire at him. Did you not see me take down your friends? How stupid are you? Oh wait, thugs, all muscle and quirk but very little brains, Rabbit taunted. Enraged, the 3 remaining fools launched their fire attacks that were easily dodging by Rabbit and knocking each one of them out by a swift punch of kick to the head. Geez, and I was expecting a harder fight, Rabbit said, tying up the 5 men with rope he found in his satchel and also covering the woman with a blanket he had in a comfort blanket, also from his satchel. After covering the woman and giving back her purse, Rabbit returned to the tied-up thugs and put labels on them that read muggers and SX offenders. Once done, he looked back to the woman in question. It was hard to guess, but from what he could guess was that she was a middle-aged woman with a slim build. She wore high heels with leggings, a pencil skirt, a white sweater and a black hairband. The reason that Rabbit was having a hard time guessing how old or what she looked like was due to her being completely invisible. Psycho, are you feeling alright? I think so. Psycho stammered out while patting around her person before looking back at Rabbit. Just a little shaken up. Good, after what I saw I thought the worst. Before Rabbit could continue talking to Psycho, a white cloth flew right in front of his face. Rabbit didn't even flinch as he just looked up and saw the pro-hero Eraserhead standing at the entrance of the alleyway. Rabbit sighed as he looked at Psycho. Oh, fun police is here, and if his expression is anything to go by, then it looks like our conversion has come to an end. It was nice meeting you, Mrs. Psycho. Psycho nodded at Rabbit with a small smile, though he couldn't see it. Of course you're the one doing this, Eraserhead grumbles while rubbing his eyes. Eraserhead, ol buddy, ol pal. How have you been? Rabbit asked. You know vigilantism is illegal, Eraserhead sighed. Just make my job easier and come quietly. Vigilantes? Where? The vigilante says as he cartoonishly looks around in random directions, drawing a giggle from Psycho in the background, who seemed to enjoy the act the vigilante was putting on. Must you always make it difficult? Eraserhead sighed, exasperated, seemingly already done with Rabbit's bullshit. Despite not showing his face, the pro-hero could tell Rabbit had a sheet-eating grin under his helmet. No, but it makes it so much more entertaining if I do. By the way, how's the thing with Mrs. Joke going? Eraserhead let a growl escape his throat as he glares at Rabbit with his glowing red eyes. Probably shouldn't have asked that, Rabbit said with a nervous chuckle and rubbed the back of his helmet before recomposing himself. Before you arrest me, I have one request. Rabbit dropped to the floor and struck a pose. Take my mugshot like one of your French girls. With Rabbit's final statement, Eraserhead prepared to throw his capture weapon when suddenly Rabbit activated the flashlights on the sides of his head, blinding the underground hero. Once he got his bearings after effectively being flashbanged, he saw the vigilante gone, and judging by the woman's hairband, she was looking off to the building roof to her right. Both their attention, however, were drawn to a letter where he once stood. Eraserhead cautiously approached it and examined it before opening it. As he opened it, glitter shot out and covered his face in it with the card reading, I hope this sparkling gift brightens your day. Love, Rabbit. I hate this kid sometimes, Eraserhead grumbles as he deals with Psycho and calls the police. Up on a rooftop some distance away from the incident, Rabbit sat on the edge of the building and stared at the city of Muzutafu at night. The city's light shone like the stars above. He reminisced about how everything led him to his current situation and him being a vigilante. He felt constrained in his helmet as he reflected on the past. He didn't feel nauseous or anything, just boiling hatred from the memories that it was suffocating. In a voice barely above a whisper, he uttered the words, Isaisi. Bip. Two small green lights from the front of his helmet switched to red after the beep, signifying that the helmet was powered off. Rabbit quickly thought back to when he made the helmet that it would be smart to have it password so only he could remove it, thus protecting his real identity. He ripped the helmet off his head quickly and took deep, but sharp, shuddering breaths as he tries to calm himself down, his green hair dancing in the light breeze. Izuku Midoriya, a quirkless 17-year-old fighting crime as a vigilante. If you told him this is how he would end up when he was younger, he probably would have laughed at you and then immediately apologized for it. He remembered when he was 14 when he got the news that would lead him down this path, about how his father's, Hisashi Midoriya, had died. He remembered that day vividly. Izuku was sitting on the couch watching the latest hero news while Inko was in the kitchen preparing dinner when there was a knock on the door. When the door opened and two police officers were standing there, they asked to come inside, to which Inko allowed them. They explained that a villain had ended him when he stumbled upon something he shouldn't have and that they would try and find them. How he and his mom cried themselves to sleep on the couch that day. The day after at school, nobody, student or teacher, seemed to care that he was grieving for his father's death. If anything, it just got worse to just make him break, and it worked. Only instead of breaking mentally, he broke one of Bakugo's lackeys' nose and arm. The detention he received and the lecture from his mom about that. But once he explained that the a-hole was saying that Hisashi's death was his fault, she gave him a lighter punishment than she was originally planning. Later on through the year, he found out through less than legal methods that the villain who ended his father was a man who went by Midas and his organization called Citadel. Beep 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 beep. Beep 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 beep. Izuku was jostled from his memories when the screen on his right arm began beeping, looking down to the screen on his right arm as he received a text notification from a contact that went by Owl. Owl. Info broker, Jiren, has been located, location has been marked. Izuku smiled when he received the message for two reasons. One was because now he had someone who could find a member of Citadel for him to interrogate and be one step closer to avenging his father's death. The second reason was because of who Owl was. It was a simple AI that he created. It had no free will or anything, could only follow his commands. It would check the surrounding environment for confirmed villains, members of Citadel or civilians that were in danger, and inform him of their location, who they are if they're from Citadel, or what the situation was. Izuku reached down to grab his helmet and slipped it back on, reciting the passcode again to lock and repower the helmet, and started to move to the direction that Owl told him to go. Kajiro Okuta, or more commonly known by his villain name Jiren, was strolling down the streets with a cigarette in his mouth. The reason for him being out so late was because that's when some of the more high-ranking villains request his service. You see, Jiren was a broker. He specialized in collecting personal data or data about companies, mostly from public records but sometimes sourced privately, and selling or licensing such information to third parties for a variety of uses and turning a profit. He was good at what he did. In fact, he was the best broker in the country, and he's been in the game long enough to trust his gut instincts. So he deliberately took to one of the alleyways and began slowing his pace. When he was on the main street, he felt watched and decided to see what they wanted. If things went well, he just earned himself a new client. If things go sour, then there were a few thugs that he was on good terms with in this alley. He finally made a stop in the middle of the alleyway and took one last drag of his cigarette before speaking. I've been in the game long enough to know that I'm being trailed. Why don't you come out and let's talk business? Not much surprised him these days, what with being employed by a 200-year-old legend and all, but he was genuinely surprised to see Rabbit of all people jump from a building's rooftop and land right in front of him. He knew about Rabbit's exploits and that some of the information he got on the Vigilante said it felt like he was on a crusade half the time, so to see the Vigilante who had piqued his interest in front of him now was a surprise. He'd never show it, but he felt like a kid on Christmas right now. He wanted to know just what the famous Rabbit wanted, for what reason. So I get to meet the famous Rabbit? What do I owe the pleasure? I heard you were the best broker in the country. Thought you could help me with something personal of mine, Rabbit said as he leaned against the wall. He was trying to look relaxed and cool, but he could see through the Vigilante's facade. He could tell Rabbit was still on guard, just waiting for either Jiren or a thug from come round the corner to try and attack him. Not to mention that his sources were indeed correct. Rabbit was seemingly on a mission. He was starting to like the Vigilante more and more. Mimicking Rabbit's actions to show he was not hostile, Jiren asked with his usual grin, "All right then, Rabbit, let's talk business. What knowledge do you seek? What do you know about Citadel, more specifically, who Midas is and or where his location may be?" His grin faltered at that. Despite being one of the best brokers in the country, not even he could figure out where Midas was, or where Citadel's was located for that matter. With a defeated sigh, Jiren spoke. "Look, Rabbit, you're not going to find him. Nobody knows the man's whereabouts or the location of Citadel. Hell, nobody knows the man's quirk. It's one of his most closely guarded secrets." Rabbit just stared at him for a few minutes before leaning off the wall and started to leave the alley. Jiren meanwhile was cursing under his breath and kicking himself over losing a potential client until he remembered something. He used to have a partner 9.5 years back, worked with him for 5. The little rat would infiltrate an organization and feed the information to Jiren, who would in turn sell it to the right people and split the profits. The rat would escape the organization when things either went south or he was found out. He remembered the rat saying something about him being in debt and owing a lot of money to somebody, but also saying that he was in too much sheet with them for it. What was it again? "I owe money to a king, that's it." He never kept in contact after the rat left because when he tried to sell Jiren out to some heroes to save his sorry hide, but luckily he knew someone who could hack and deleted the information, so he feels no remorse for sicking the Vigilante on him. 2 birds and 1 stone. I get Rabbit as a potential client and I get my little revenge on that rat. "Hey, Rabbit, wait." Jiren called out to the Vigilante. Rabbit stopped and turned around to face the broker. Seeing he had Rabbit's attention again, Jiren leaned forward and spoke with his grin back in full force. I might know somebody who may know where they are. Akaharu Akinasuke was a man with short, swept-back silver hair with black tips, deep blue eyes, a square jawline with a 5 o'clock shadow and a decent body build. His quirk allowed him to heat his hands up to the temperature of a kitchen stove top, not very useful unless you're in with Citadel. He lived his life with very little regrets, but don't get him wrong, if he sees a situation going south he'll leave high and dry. If he gets caught he'll sing like a canary. As long as he's not behind bars it's all fair in his mind. But not even him will rat out his current employer, a man that runs Citadel like an empire. He may be many things but a fool wasn't one of them, to squeal on someone who could turn him into a statue with just a touch. Akaharu was walking out of a pub late at night from celebrating when it happened. He felt fine, but as soon as he walked into a back alley was when he felt a sting on his neck. He felt the where it was and felt an object. Pulling it free was when he saw it, a tranquilizer dart. Soon after his vision went black. He didn't know how much time had passed, but when he came to was when he noticed that his arms and legs were bound and he was on top of a building. Looking around he found the person who did this sitting on an air conditioner unit. He tried to think of anything he did to bring the ire of Rabbit, but it brought up nothing, so he grinned confidently at the vigilante. So you're the famous Rabbit? Never thought I'd ever meet you in person. Just wished it was on better circumstances. He was hoping to strike up a conversation with the vigilante and maybe talk his way out of whatever he had done to catch Rabbit's attention. Sadly the vigilante said nothing and kept looking at him through the black-tinted visor he had on his helmet. If interrogated later, Akaharu would freely admit that Rabbit not moving or saying anything and just staring at him was the most terrifying thing he had ever witnessed. After a moment of suspenseful silence, Rabbit finally spoke with an air of force. Where's Midas? Where is Citadel? Shit, so that's what he's after, Akaharu cursed in his mind. Sorry to break it to you, Rabbit, but I don't know, and even if I did I wouldn't tell you. Unless you can offer me amnesty, then I might consider. You seem to have misjudged your situation. You're in no position to make any sort of demands. The vigilante stood up and walked towards Akaharu. Despite only seeing his reflection in Rabbit visor, he could feel the man's gaze from under his helmet. Suddenly Rabbit grabbed him by the collar and dangled his upper body over the tall building. I'm only going to ask nicely once. Where is Citadel's location? Where is Midas? Look, Rabbit, I've raided outed organizations to different heroes and vigilantes. I've done this threatening interaction stick with Eraser Bum a few times and he never goes through with it because of his hero code. So trust me when I say that I'll never, ever tell. He never got to finish his sentence because Rabbit did one thing every hero and vigilante had never done with him in this scenario. He actually let go to let him plummet to the ground. He would deny that when he fell he screamed like a little girl as the group got closer and closer. His brain didn't register that he had stopped a few feet off the ground thanks to some rope tied around his legs connected to the building. The only reason it did was that Rabbit grabbed him by his hair and forced the upside-down man to look at him. I'd recommend you talk while you still have a jaw, he growled. And so Akiharu did just that. Look, I don't know where Citadel is, but there's a hierarchy in Citadel. Midas sits at the top, then there's Sharon who works for Midas directly and acts as both his bodyguard and second in command for him. He is fiercely loyal to him to the point some of us call him lapdog. Though we'd never say it to his face. What is Midas's endgame? What is his mission? Rabbit interrogated, pulling his head closer to the helmet of the vigilante. Akiharu could tell by Rabbit's tone of voice that he was getting very impatient. I don't know. I'm just a caretaker. A caretaker for what? Questioned the vigilante, the internet clear as day in his voice. Akiharu flinched as he realized he let his mouth blubber. When stressed like he was now, he tended to say things that really he shouldn't. Us some snot-nosed brats. That's all, I swear. How do I get in contact with Midas? Akiharu gulped. Why, you can contact Midas through the dark net. Apart from that, I don't know. He proceeded to explain to the vigilante how to get in contact with Midas through the dark net, all while shaking in his boots, all because he'd never heard of Rabbit ever acting like this. It was terrifying when you could tell that he was pissed and that he was barely able to hold back his anger, but all you could see was your reflection in his visor. Rabbit stared at Akiharu for a bit. His reflection reflected off Rabbit's visor to show the man that he was barely hiding his fear. Thank you for your cooperation. With those final words Akiharu heard as he was hit in the temple for his world to go dark once more, now with one regret in his life and one new fear. If you never want to tick off Rabbit, never get on radar. A 6-year-old Izuku was crying as he stood in front of a house. There were 3 adult figures, one being his mother and 2 that he didn't recognize. He was crying because his only friend was leaving and he didn't know when he would see her again. He held his friend tightly and refused to let go of fear that she would disappear. His friend held him just as tight as she kept mumbling, "I don't want to go," over and over again. "Sweetie, it's time to go," the voice of his female friend's mother called softly. She just held him tighter and shook with all her might. "No. I don't want to leave. I want to stay with you," she yelled at her mother. No one blamed her for this as the two were thick as thieves. "Toru, honey, we have to go, but I promise that you two will meet again someday." The voice of her father sounded. Izuku backed out of the hug and looked at his friend and her family. They were shrouded in a twisting black mist where you couldn't make out any defining features. It's okay Toru, one day we'll meet again and we'll become the best hero team ever," he shouted in determination. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a green stuffed bunny. "I know you like plushies, so have this to remember me by." She gingerly reached out and took the stuffed rabbit. She held it close to her body as the tears refused to stop. She ran to a box and retrieved the contents of the box and gave it to Izuku. He was shocked considering it was one of her most prized and loved plushie possessions, a black cat with emerald eyes. "Have this, Izuku. It'll never forget me." "I won't. I promise Toru," Izuku shouted as the world went black once more. When he woke up again the next morning, he was greeted by the aroma of bacon from his mother's cooking drifting into his room as she was making breakfast. Despite his body's reluctance, he got out of bed and looked to the corner of his bed. There the black plush cat sat, staring at him with its emerald eyes that made his gut twist. It wasn't so much that the stuffed animal creeped him out, but more of the fact that now the eyes seemed to hold a look of, "You forgot your best friend, you forgot both her name and what she looked like. What type of friend are you?" It hurt to see it, but he would meet her eventually. He won't break their promises of being heroes together. With a final sigh of defeat, Izuku got up and walked out of his room to the dining table. "Morning, Mom," Izuku yawned. "Morning, sweetie," Inko replied with a bright motherly smile from the kitchen. "By the way, sweetie, we're getting new neighbors today." "Really? That's great. Who are they?" Izuku inquired. Inko shrugged her shoulders and continued cooking. "Don't know, but I'm going to invite them to dinner as a welcome to the neighborhood." Izuku sat at the table waiting for his mother's amazing cooking to be done when he realized that the news was on and the story today took his interest. We are now live in Mizudafu, where the vigilante known as Rabbit has struck again. The thugs that were captured have been linked to multiple assaults, robberies and sewer assaults all over the country. The camera showed some police tape outside the alleyway he helped Psycho last night. Nobody still knows the identity or the whereabouts of this vigilante, but if what the police are saying, he could be looking at a long sentence for illegal quirk usage. As the news kept playing, he heard his mother sigh from the kitchen as she laid the breakfast in front of him. "Something wrong, Mom?" "I'm fine, Izuku," Inko sighed as she looked in the direction of the TV. "I just hope that this rabbit vigilante stops soon. I don't like the idea of someone putting their life on the line without someone watching their back." Izuku hummed as he ate his breakfast. He would never tell his mom that he was the vigilante she was speaking of. It hurt him every time he looked at her and knowingly lied to her face. He didn't like it, but he wouldn't stop until he got his vengeance against Midas. Only then will he stop. Izuku always hated school. For obvious reasons, it always seemed to be getting slower and slower as time moved on. He could think about everything he could be doing now if he wasn't in school, like being on patrol, but no, he had to be at a school that hated him just as much as he hated it. But today seemed to be a bit different, as today the teacher came in with a slight smile. "All right, class. Today we have something to actually talk about in homeroom today." The class quieted down as the teacher continued speaking. "Today we have a new student. She's come all the way from Tokyo, so please give a warm welcome to Toru Hagakure." Most of the class clapped and cheered as she walked in. Izuku just glanced up from his notebook to the girl in question, and all air was stuck in his throat. Toru was a fairly short girl with a completely invisible body. She is only identifiable through held or worn objects, like the school uniform, bracelet and black hairband accessories she was wearing, her body appears to be slender yet fairly curvaceous. Now Izuku wasn't one to openly stare at someone, but him seeing two invisible people so recently couldn't be a coincidence. Hi. Like our teacher said, my name is Toru Hagakure. I came from Tokyo and my quirk is called invisibility. My mom and dad came down here so I could enter the UA entrance exam. Thank you, Hagakure. Please take a seat next to Midoriya and let me know if he ever bothers you. With a slight bow from the woman, she made her way to where Izuku was and sat at his right. What the new invisible student didn't know was the glare from the teacher sent to him after he finished his sentence. She turned to him and bounced in her seat. Hi, Midoriya. Nice to meet you. And nice to meet you too. As class began, Izuku mainly kept his head down to not endure anyone's anger. Sadly, due to his years of being a vigilante and how he was treated at school, he picked up the habit of thinking that he and Rabbit were different people. Rabbit was serious but would crack jokes to make the victim feel better and to rile his enemies up. He radiated confidence, was skilled in fighting and was smart in the decisions he made. Izuku, on the other hand, was just some quirkless nobody who was too timid to even look someone in the eye without fear of them beating him down for looking at them. Despite what he does as a vigilante and knowing what he can do, he still craves for someone, anyone, to validate his dreams of becoming a hero. When lunch came around, Izuku started to make his way up to the roof where he would be able to eat his lunch without anyone bothering him. At least that was the plan for today, but when he was about to open the door to the roof, a voice came from behind him. "Whatcha doin'?" The voices startled the secret vigilante as he turned to look only to see the floating clothes of his new classmate, Hagakure. "I was hoping to eat on the R roof," Izuku stuttered. "Oh, cool," Hagakure shouted in excitement. "I often ate on the roof at my previous school too. You don't mind if I join you, do you?" "And not at all," Izuku blurted out before he even realized what he just said. "Why the hell did I agree to this?" Izuku and Hagakure were currently sitting in a shaded part of the roof and enjoying their food. To Izuku's surprise, he actually didn't feel nervous or as flustered as he thought when he agreed to eat with her. Though the quiet was nice, Hagakure turned to look at Izuku. "Hey, Midoriya, can I ask you something?" Izuku looked at the invisible girl with a mouth full of food and nodded his head in confirmation. Hagakure hesitated for a moment before relenting. "I noticed that some of our classmates were giving you some looks and I was wondering why." Izuku choked, which caused Hagakure to freak out a bit and patted his back. He wasn't expecting someone to ask that or notice the glares from everyone. After a bit of coughing and chugging some water, Izuku sighed to himself. "So much for making a new friend," he thought as he turned his head towards her. "The reason they're giving me looks is because I'm quirkless. I'm weak compared to them and due to my dreams they see it as an insult that I don't know my place." Izuku screwed his eyes shut as he waited for the inevitable sounds of the doors slamming shut and him being left of the roof, or the sounds of her mocking him like the rest. He knew this was the natural order of things and that if you were quirkless you were nothing but a bug on a window and that nobody would care about you. He often thought that his mom was the only exception. Hagakure provided that his mother wasn't, in fact, the only exception. "That's bullshit," Hagakure yelled, startling the green-haired boy next to her. "How can people be like this? Who cares what quirk you have? It shouldn't define who you are. Who cares if you're quirkless? You're still human." She spoke with so much passion, but there was a hint of experience that only one could get from living through a similar situation. Then clicked for Izuku when he looked at his classmate again and realized she looked like a ghost. Nothing there except just some hollow, floating clothes. She must have gone through quirk discrimination because of how she looks, Izuku summarized. "Hey, Haga-dash. Toru," she barked. Izuku stared at her in both worry and confusion. "It's Toru to you, Midori. If this is how people treat others, then as far as I'm concerned you're my only friend." Izuku looked on in shock at what he heard. Never before had someone acted like this in front of him like this. Despite his blush, he looked at the invisible woman with one of his brightest smiles. "Thanks, Hagti Toru. But you can call me Izuku?" "Sure thing, Izuku," Toru replied with her body showing excitement before a realization came over her. "Oh shoot. I interrupted what you were gonna say. I'm sorry." "It's okay, Toru," Izuku chuckled at his new friend. "All I wanted to say is, why do you want to be a hero?" I don't like bullies, I don't care who or where they're from, and if I can make one person smile then that's all right by me, she replied before looking at Izuku. What about you, Izuku? What is this dream that everyone thinks is an affront to God? Izuku was hesitant, unsure if he should, but decided to lower his walls a tiny bit to see what would happen. I want to be a hero, I want to just save people because that's the right thing to do. Nothing more and nothing less. Toru looked at her new green-haired friend with a soft smile. Well, let me tell you that I think you can be a hero, Izuku. After all, I have to support my best buddy. Be best buddy? Yeah. As I said, if they are gonna treat you like that, I want nothing to do with it, so you're currently my only friend. She bounced excitedly as she ruffled Izuku's hair, much to his blushing embarrassment and unaware that he actually leaned into her touch. Hey, Toru. Yeah. Thank you. It was now the end of the school day when we see Izuku and Toru sitting at their desks talking away to each other. Many of the other students tried to talk and befriend Toru, but she told them to their faces that she is a firm believer of the saying, treat others like how you want to be treated, and since they treated Izuku with hate and scorn, she wanted nothing to do with them. This rightful pissed some of the students off as she sided with the quirkless freak of all people, and not even before the bell rang she, just like Izuku, was now ostracized by the school body. Not that she cared, mind you, she had Izuku and to her that was all that mattered in her world. During the last lesson, the teacher walked into the classroom with a stack of papers that had everyone's wishes for what course they wished to be on and which university they would like to go to, and threw them into the air, proclaiming that everyone wanted to be on the hero track. Everyone but 3 people used their quirks to show their excitement. Bakugo did his usual gloating and bragging about how he was getting into UA. Toru just sat there not wanting any part of this, but then the teacher did something that she didn't expect, but Izuku was. He called out that the only quirkless student in the school wanted to be on the hero course. This got the usual reactions from everyone. The students and teachers started laughing at him and saying he couldn't without a quirk, Bakugo launching himself at him and telling him to quit if he knew what was good for him. All in all, a pretty normal day for Izuku. Though Toru was less than thrilled that he came to expect this. So, Toru, Izuku asked, turning his head to look at his new friend after putting on his backpack, what are you doing after school? Sadly, I have to run to our place to get the final things moved in. Sorry, Izuku. Toru apologized. Izuku knew she meant it and just shook his head and waved off the apology. It's okay, Toru. We can hang out tomorrow. Sure. I have to go, but see you tomorrow, Izuku, she said as she left the classroom, her invisible hand waving goodbye at him. Once he was alone was when Katsuki and his cronies made their move. Before Izuku could even finish packing his stuff, Bakugo snatched his notebook right out of his hand and stood over Izuku with utter disrespect for the green-haired small boy etched into his being. I don't know what you think you're doing, Deku, but we're not done. Don't tell me you're taking notes on how to be a hero. One of Bakugo's 2 flunkies laughed at the sight of Izuku's hero analysis for the future number 13 notebook. That's so pathetic. He's utterly delusional, mocked the other. Izuku looked between the two and Bakugo as they picked on him. Yeah, real funny guys. Just give it back. Bakugo slammed the notebook between his fists, making an explosion that torched Izuku's pride as the boy made a distressing wail before whimpering. That's so mean. With an unsettling amount of casual disinterest, Bakugo tossed the torched notebook over his shoulder, where it flew outside the open window. Midoriya reached for it in a panic, but it was already well beyond his grasp. I'm the only one from this garbage school to get into UA. People will start talking about me like that. They'll realize I'm legit, the next big thing. That's not ego talking, I just know I'm good, Katsuki snarled. Ego, one of his lackeys thought, looking at the smug expression on Bakugo's face. Bakugo's hand was on Izuku's shoulder, giving the green-haired boy a grin with no mirth in it. Smoke came from his hand. He was causing his nitro sweat to burn into Izuku's shoulder. Here's a little word of advice, nerd. Don't even think of applying or else. All Izuku could do in response was whimper. Whether that was in pain, fear, or a dreadful cocktail of both, it wasn't clear, but he certainly looked frozen to the spot without an ounce of courage. The bullies started to leave, their expressions satisfied with the result. That's just sad, one of them began. I thought you at least had some fight in you. He finally gets it. He'll never be a hero. Better to find out now instead of later, I guess, laughed the other. Bakugo glanced back behind him towards Izuku. His expression seemed kind, and actually somewhat nice. He still looked a little stuck up, but he'd lost all the rage and condescending demeanor. You know, if you really want to be a hero that badly, there actually might be another way. Just pray that you'll be born with a quirk in your next life, and take a swan dive off the roof of the building. Izuku turned around and glared at Katsuki with tears at the base of his eyes, growling. Bakugo raised his right hand up, explosions bursting around his fingers. Something wrong? Izuku froze again, whimpering in terror at the implied threat. Seeing that the green-haired boy wasn't going to do anything, Katsuki just scoffed. Pathetic, he walked out with his two cronies to leave Midoriya all alone. After recomposing himself, he rushed out the door and grabbed the surprising, still mostly intact notebook. Izuku walking along the grounds at the base of the school, fortunately not up on the roof. Idiot, he thought, you can't go around telling people to end themselves. What if I'd really jumped? What would he do then? Given the angry tone to his thoughts, it seemed like jumping was not an option he'd seriously considered. Izuku walked home from school, holding his burnt hero notebook in his hand as he stood beneath a pedestrian tunnel with a sign saying, "Watch your head." Above it as he headed into the tunnel, sludge rose up behind Izuku. Some made the young man stop and turn around as the amorphous form of the villain towered over him. Izuku's vigilante instincts kicked in and swiftly dogged a tendril that was aimed at him, a medium-sized skin suit. A skilled one at that too. "You'll make a perfect skin suit for me to hide in, kid," the sludge villain joyfully said as he continued his assault to try and capture the green-haired boy. While Izuku could dodge all he liked, the simple fact that he couldn't use his equipment was keeping him from attacking the villain. He often carried his suit and some of his gadgets in his backpack, just in case, but since the villain wouldn't give him an inch, he couldn't reach into it and grab something. Fortunately, luck seemed to be on his side right now as from the manhole a large figure shot out and landed in between Izuku and the villain. Due to how the figure landed, it kicked up some dust, but once it settled, All Might was revealed. "Have no fear, you're safe." He stomped his foot down, dust rising from the concrete. "Now that I am here, that is." All Might dodged a second attack the sludge villain through to keep the buff hero Awas and wound his right fist. Texuas. Smash. He threw his fist forward, a torrent of wind blowing the sludge villain away. "I can't hold it together." The villain's fluid body tried to stick together, but the force of the punch splattered the villain all over the tunnel. "All Might." Izuku stuttered, shocked as he looked at his idol, the very same man that Izuku adored and took inspiration for Rabbit's personality. "Ah, fear not. The danger is over now, civilian," All Might said. He got to work on collecting the downed sludge villain in an empty bottle he found. "Are you all right? Oh, my name's Izuku." "Izuku Midoriya," Izuku said, bowing in front of All Might before fishing into his backpack, handing the buff hero his notebook and asking, Please, could you sign this?" "No problem, young man." All Might took the book and flipped through some pages. He signed his signature on one of the pages before handing it back. "Wait, All Might. Can I ask a question?" Izuku asked. "I'm sorry, young man, but I must dash. Is it possible to become a hero even if I don't have a quirk?" All Might stopped in his tracks. "I'm a normal kid without any powers," Izuku continued. "Could I ever hope to be someone like you?" All Might stopped and half-turned to look back at Izuku. "Without a quirk?" All Might thought before replying. Pro heroes are always having to risk their lives. Some villains just can't be beaten without powers. So can you be a hero? Not without a quirk. All Might took off, but not before looking at Izuku, who had his hair down, his eyes covered by his hair. Once Izuku was alone, he grit his teeth and threw his backpack, spilling his vigilante costume across the ground. Of course, nobody thinks I can do it. Not even All Might. The only two who think so are Mom and Toru. He continued to fume his frustrations until he collapsed to his knees, looking into the visor of Rabbit. "Why doesn't anyone think I can do it?" he said. "You know you can. You're Rabbit. You know you can. Just believe in yourself for once." Izuku sighed as he went to collect his stuff as he heard a loud explosion off in the distance. He thought someone might be in trouble, so he quietly stripped and donned his rabbit costume and made his way to the source. Izuku eventually found the disturbance only to find the same sludge villain from before, shrouded by fire. Death Arms, MT Lady and Kamui Woods all standing around not doing anything. The only person doing something was Backdraft as he was trying to combat the flames. He was about to jump off to let the heroes handle it, but he caught something that the villain shouted at the gathered heroes, citizens and reporters, "Stay back or I'll snap his neck." The villain taunted the heroes. Izuku looked back down and saw that he did, in fact, have a hostage, though he couldn't quite see who it was until Death Arms spoke. "That kid's quirk is causing explosions left and right." Bakugo? He thought as another explosion rattled the area. Deep down inside him, Izuku felt a bit of pressure seeing his tormentor like this, now knowing what it felt like to be helpless and weak. A sinister part of his mind told him to just leave Katsuki where he was and not intervene, but his body acted without his approval. Izuku reached into his satchel and pulled a gun-looking object out and jumped down to the ground in between the heroes and the villain. Before anyone could do anything, he pulled the gun-like object up and fired at Bakugo. A tether and latch shot out of the grappling gun and wrapped itself around the ash blonde as Rabbit pulled his tormentor free from the villain. Izuku dashed forward, dodging the slime tendrils, and reached his target. He shot his hands into the villain and activated his taser gloves. Because the villain's body was a water-like substance, it fried the villain inside and out before it went spat once more. Rabbit turned around and saw the shocked faces of everyone. The cameras pointed straight at him. He could even see ME Lady bouncing on her feet in glee at seeing him. He knew he had some fans, but he didn't expect a pro hero to be one of them. His attention soon turned to Bakugo. "I really didn't want to save you." Those words shocked everyone nearby, but he paid them no mind. "If I wasn't so nice, I would have let you suffer a bit more." "The F do you dash?" "I was in the area when I heard what you said to your classmate, the one you call Deku." He didn't let Katsuki finish his sentence as he spoke sharply. "These ear antennas aren't just for show, you know. You expect to be the next big hero. You expect to go to UA when you just told that boy, Izuku, I think I heard one of his other classmates say, to take a swan dive off the roof of the building and pray for a quirk in his next life. If he wasn't already mad from his confrontation with All Might, he would have heard the gasping from the civilians. You're just a punk thug with an ego. You may think you're a hero, but you're not. You're just like the villain I took out." Rabbit stepped back and launched his grappling hook at the building. "You're lucky he didn't go through with it," he said as he launched himself up to the roof and out of sight. Izuku sat on a rooftop some distance from where the slime villain incident occurred without his helmet on. He sighed in disappointment when he recalled what had happened and how he acted to Bakugo, how he let his anger slip a little and regretted doing that in front of the cameras. He shouldn't ruin people's careers when they haven't even started. He had no right to do so. But that little voice in his head couldn't help but gleefully say that the blonde brought it on himself. He just gave it a little push. "Oh well, what's done is done," Izuku thought to himself as he sighed once more. "Can't exactly do damage control now, can I?" He just hopes that nothing bad comes from this. Izuku put his helmet back on and stood up to begin walking towards the other side of the building. Mrs. Joke should be on patrol now if I have my timetables correct. I like it when we bump into each other. Like she doesn't try to capture me and often allows me to join her. I like hearing her joke around and she makes me smile and laugh. I could really use her right now." When he was at the edge of the building, he turned around and sprinted to where he once sat and jumped to the building in front of it. He kept running and jumping from rooftop to rooftop, patrolling and seeing if there was anything he could do. That's when he saw it. When he was leaving after helping a lost child find her mother, he looked up towards a building and saw someone up there over the railing. Rabbit quickly shot his grappling hook and scaled the building until he reached the top where he saw the person about to jump. "Sir," he spoke softly, startling the boy who was probably a year older than him. "Do you mind stepping away from the railing, please?" "Why?" "Because I know what it's like to be at that edge. It's not fun." "Talk to me. Maybe I could help?" The boy paused for a moment, allowing Rabbit to take a look at him a bit. He had short black hair with silver tips. Bone-like blades protruded from his arms and curved to and past his elbow. What caught Rabbit's attention was that the boy wore what looked like the UA uniform. After a moment of silence, the UA boy spoke. "I went to UA today. It was our first day and I was excited. Granted, me and the class was confused why we were told to not unpack our stuff in the dorms yet by our teacher, but we did what was asked of us. He told us to put some gym clothes on and meet him on the field. We did so and was met with a quirk apprehension test. He told us that if whoever came last got expelled." The boy spoke, turning his attention to the vigilante behind him. The boy's silver eyes grew slightly in shock seeing Rabbit but continued. Me and my class did everything we could. We pushed ourselves and our quirks to the point some of us collapsed. When we got our scores though, and when I saw myself at 15th, I thought I was safe, but he told us that we were expelled, that we had and showed no potential and to leave the grounds immediately. Did any of you say anything? Rabbit asked, his voice turning cold. One of my former classmates said that it wasn't fair, that we pushed ourselves and completed the UA exam, that we earned our place here. Tears welled in his silver eyes. He turned round and said that life wasn't fair before walking off. The silver-eyed boy stared at the unmoving form of Rabbit for a bit. He may not know what was going on underneath that helmet of his, but he could tell the vigilante was in thought. So what led you to wanting to take your own life? He finally spoke. My father owns a toy shop. We don't get that many customers, and I wanted to help by becoming a hero so he could live a nice life, especially after. The boy hesitated for a second and looked down. Especially after Mom died when I was 13. Now I can't even do that. I'm just a waste. If I weren't here then Dad could actually have money for a nice life. But the last connection to his wife would be gone. The boy's head wiped up at that, so Rabbit continued. With you gone he would have nothing left. His wife and, I'm guessing, only child are dead. He now lives in an empty home with nothing to live for anymore. As I said, I know what it's like to be at that edge. It's not fun. But why were you here? Because I'm quirkless, Rabbit said bluntly. Only after he said that and the shocked look on the black-haired boy in front of him did he attempt to do damage control. Don't go posting that on the internet or tell anyone, alright? Slip of the tongue is all. And oh no. It's fine. I actually have a little sister who's quirkless. The boy explained quickly. I know how bad life can be for quirkless people because of her. All she wants is to be a quirkless hero / to become a quirkless hero, they said at the same time. Yeah, I know, Rabbit chuckled before taking a thinking pose. Do you have contact with your former classmates? Why yeah. We traded numbers before our teacher came to get us. Good. I have connections with Mrs. Joke, who is a teacher at Ketsubutsu. Tell them that they might take you lot in, Rabbit explained, but I need you to step over that barrier first. The black-haired boy looked down at the pavement below once more before slowly climbing back over the safety rails. Thank you, Rabbit. This means a lot. No problem. Oh, I'm Asahai Ayaki. No problem, Ayaki. Rabbit nodded as he made his way to leave. Just before he could, however, Ayaki called out to him. Turning around he saw Ayaki bowing with a pen and notebook presented to him. My sister is a fan of yours. Do you think you could give her an autograph? There was a long pause after that, to the point that Ayaki honestly thought Rabbit already left. Unknown to him though was that Izuku was blushing madly from underneath his helmet. Before he heard the vigilante speak, what's your sister's name? I know it's hard sometimes, but just know that I believe in you. You'll have to work hard, train and use your head, but you can do it. I hope you can join a hero school in the future and show the world that quirkless does not mean worthless. You're going to have to use your smarts just as much as your muscles, because everyone will always outclass you in strength, but you can beat them in intellect. So train your body and mind, and I hope to see you in the pro hero charts. Sincerely, your favorite vigilante, Rabbit. Toru was having a wonderful day in her opinion. When she was told that they would be moving back to Mizudafu, she was excited because she could meet back up with her childhood friend. She just couldn't shake the guilt that she carried for forgetting her friend's name and what he looked like. Then there was her first day at Aldra, which could have gone better in her opinion. She met a nice boy there that she felt was familiar in a way she couldn't quite place. He told her about how the school operated and was heavily in discrimination, so he became her first and only friend from Aldra. Now came finishing up the move with her mother and father. The reason for both moves was because of her mom and dad being with the police and detective forces, and it caused them to have to go from Mizudafu to Tokyo for their work. Now that the final things have been put away, she moved onto her stuffed animals that she put on her incredibly scoffed bed, and at the forefront was her most treasured animal, the green rabbit he gave her all those years ago. Hey Toru. She turned to see her mother standing at the door. Do you think you could run down to the store real quick and pick up some items for us? Sure thing, Mom. Toru bounced to her feet and darted to the door. She grabbed her purse before exiting the apartment and skipped her way down the streets. As she passed an alleyway, she noticed a poster of someone in an all-black and green suit with bunny ears hanging on the wall with the words, "Rabbit" on it. She suggested her shoulders and kept walking but was stopped when she saw 3 men wearing surgical masks who pulled her to one side. "Where do you think you're going?" A guy with a purple shirt said. "Nowhere's right, sweetie," a guy in an orange t-shirt responded. "Oh look, I just want to go to the shops to get some things for my mom," she shakily told them, unaware that the third guy with a green shirt reached out and took her purse from her. "Ichuai. Hard to do that without any money, Invisibeach." The green guy laughed as he threw the purse to the other 3 to keep it out of her reach. That was until a pickup truck arrived and honked its horn. "Hey. Come on, we gotta go." The driver yelled as the other 3 rushed to the truck and hopped in, pushing Toru to the ground in the process. As they drove off, laughing all the while, Toru picked herself up and looked in the direction of where they went. Against her better judgment, she chased after them in an attempt to get her purse back. After a few minutes of searching, he eventually found them, loading some crates onto a truck. She was about to get a better view when the guy in purple dropped right in front of her while the guy in orange flopped out of an age-sent alleyway screaming for his life before being dragged back in, his nails scraping against the concrete in a futile attempt to not go to whoever was dragging him back in. "Yo, go check that out," a guy on the truck said to 2 thugs wearing white and blue. The 2 nodded at him before making their way over to her direction. Toru panicked slightly and hid behind the crate again, peeking over to see what was going as they reached their comrade. "Hey, come on, get up," the one in blue said. Just as the purple guy stood, the one who was dragged away was suddenly thrown at the 3 and hit an electrical box, electrocuting him and knocking out the lights. The 3 looked at their fallen friend before readying themselves with pipes and bats. "Why, you see anything?" the one in white said. "Who's there?" Blue shouted. "Enough games, freak," Purple snapped. "Come out and fight." Gladly, the person who Toru recognized from the poster shot out from the alleyway and clocked Blue in the face. He ducked under the sewing from White and elbowed him in the face before using that momentum to punch Purple. Rabbit spun around and grabbed White from the back of the head and slammed him face first into the wall, crashing the concrete it was made of in the process. The guy on the truck finally saw what was going on and stared at Rabbit for a few minutes before whistling loud enough to grab anyone's attention. He reached into a large crate and pulled out a fully automatic machine gun and opened fire on Rabbit, who ducked behind the alleyway he came from. 3 more guys on the roof rushed forward and shot at where Rabbit ducked. "Hope this prototype works," Toru heard Rabbit say as he pulled out what looked like a mini grenade launcher and stuffed a light purple ball in it. After making sure it was loaded, he jumped and rolled out of the alleyway and took aim at the guy on the truck. Pulling the trigger, the light purple ball shot through the air and hit the guy square in the chest. A foam-like substance covered his body before quickly hardening and causing the 3 on the roof were distracted for a few moments. Rabbit used this as he ran up some stacked boxes and jumped, pointing his pistol at the 3 and firing the same, but smaller, light purple pellets at them and having the same effect. As they fell, Rabbit stalked to the guy who wore the blue shirt and pinned him to the wall. "Now what made you think you could sell trigger in my neck of the woods? Come on. Let's go." A second truck pulled up and a few guys loaded the captured men. Blue pushed Rabbit off him and bolted to the truck. "You don't get off that easy," Rabbit roared as he was about to give chase until one of them threw an actual grenade towards her. As the truck took off, Toru tried to back away. Seeing this, Rabbit shot the explosive with the purple foam before diving onto Toru as the explosion went off. Rabbit skidded across the ground before coming to a stop. He sat up with a grunt of pain as he released the invisible woman in his arms. She looked at him as he grabbed his left side and clenched his fist, unable to see the look of pure shock on Toru's face. "You saved me," she said, Rabbit turning around to look at her. "Why?" "Because what type of person would I be if I didn't help people?" "Run home, miss. It isn't safe out here," Rabbit told her as he tossed her the purse that was taken from her. Just before he could leave, Toru spoke. "You're a hero, ain't you?" "Not even close," was his only word as he ran back into the smoking alleyway. "I think you are." Toru ran through the streets back to her apartment. On the way, she grabbed the Rabbit poster from the wall she passed earlier. "Toru, where were you?" Her mother said. "We were worried sick." Her father checked when he came to them. "I'm sorry, Mom, but you won't believe what happened." So she them about what had happened involving her purse. Her admittedly dumb decision to follow Rabbit and him saving her. In the end, the family had a group hug over the fact that their daughter was alright, though she would have a punishment for her reclass decision that almost got her ended. She was told that their neighbor invited them to dinner, so she entered her room to change into something not covered in soot and put up her new poster. She opened her purse to check her money once more when a note dropped out. I know you're planning to become a hero. You have the ability, but it could be refined. If you wish to, meet me at XXXX Street, the warehouse at 6 o'clock, this Saturday. Rabbit? She read the note twice to make sure that she had this correct. Rabbit, the person who saved her, wants to train her to become a hero. He didn't know how to feel, but luckily she had 5 more days to come to a decision. She turned to her window to let some air in, but up on the roof across the street, Rabbit stood as his waistcloth fluttered in the wind and his form illuminated by the glow of the rising moon behind him. He made sure she made it home all right and without any further incidents. He nodded to her as he turned around and out of sight. Thank you, my hero. Of all the places she had to be, it had to be right next door. Izuku said to himself as he was having a temporary crisis in his room. How the hell am I going to keep this a secret? I could get away with it with Mom because of her job at the hospital, but now Toru could put my identity at risk. Izuku was following Toru after what happened and just wanted to make sure that she made it to her home safe. Once he found out that she lived right next door to him, made him have a panic attack, especially when she looked out the window at him. All he could do was nod and leave to try and find a new way into his room. Slapping his cheeks, he took a deep breath and relaxed a little, letting his mind calm down. At least I know who our new neighbors are, he thought before sighing. How can this day get any weirder? He spoke with some frustration. First I make a friend in the new girl who might be related to Psycho, then I get suicide batted by my ex-childhood friend, get my old dreams crushed by my idol despite knowing what I can do as Rabbit, possibly ruin my tormentor's chances at getting into any school, let alone a hero school, accidentally let someone know I'm quirkless, almost letting my new friend get hurt because I wasn't paying attention. Now my identity as a vigilante could be revealed by her, and I gave her a note saying I would train her. Izuku flopped down onto his bed, looking at the ceiling. What has my life come to? Pulling himself up and out of his room, he made his way towards the living room where the smell of his mother's cooking filled his senses. He was about to offer his help to her when a knock on the door caught their attention. Izuku, could you get that? It might be them, Inko asked. He nodded at her and made his way to the door. As he opened it, he acted surprised to see Toru and her family standing at the door. Izuku? Toru gasped in shock. You're our neighbor? You know this boy, Toru dear? Her mother spoke, which he identified as Psycho's voice. Yeah. She bounced over to Izuku and wrapped an arm around his shoulder in a sideways hug. This is my friend, Izuku Midoriya. Both of Toru's parents went stiff upon hearing their daughter speaking his name. If Izuku had to guess, that they were shocked for reasons he was not aware of. Eventually her father, a man who wore a gray fedora, a trench coat, black gloves, bandages wrapped around his face and black-tinted sunglasses, spoke as he pointed his gloved finger at him. Did you say Midoriya? Before Toru could question her parents about why they were acting weird, Inko made her presence known. Izuku sweetie, are you going to invite me? Inko trailed off as she gazed at the people standing at the door. After a beat of silence, she spoke with some hope in her voice. Psycho? Fukuya? Is that you? Inko. Both Hagakures yelled in joy as they rushed the green-haired women and glommed her into a tight hug. This confused both Izuku and Toru, so they decided to let their parents sort out whatever was going on with them. They slipped out into the hallway and started to make their way to Izuku's room. Much to his blushing embarrassment, what was all that about? No clue, Izuku, Toru replied as they walked into the room. She didn't know what she expected in his room, but the blank barren walls and cluttered desk with wires, bolts, screws, motors and a 3D printer was not one of them. She looked at the walls closer and saw that there were faint rectangular lines around the walls, almost like posters were recently taken down. Sorry about the mess, Izuku said as he stealthily kicked a box full of his rabbit gear and costumes under his bed. To his luck, Toru didn't seem to notice. I didn't have time to clean up. He heard no reply from his invisible friend, so he turned to look at her and saw her facing his bed. Izuku tilted his head in confusion until she made her way to his bed and picked up the cat plushie. Where did you get this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. My old friend gave it to me before she left, Izuku revealed, taking note of Toru's shaking form as she clutched the stuffed animal. I feel awful because I made a promise that we would meet at UA together, but I forgot her name. What kind of friend am I for doing that dash? He never got to finish his sentence as an invisible bullet rammed into him as Toru wrapped her arms around Izuku and rested her head on his shoulder. He was about to ask why she did that until he felt tears soaking his shirt. Phew. What's wrong? Izzy. One word. That one word caused Izuku's mind to remember every instance where that was used. And it all started at a park he used to visit. A 4-year-old Izuku was crying on the ground, his pale green shirt ripped and burnt in spots around his body as faint smoke was rising from his shoulders. Towering above him was none other than his childhood friend Katsuki Bakugo and his 3 friends behind him. They were laughing at his misfortune while the blonde was sneering down at him. The reason for this? All because Izuku just wanted to be a hero despite not having a quirk to call his own. In response, Katsuki and his group dragged Izuku to a part of the park away from most adults to remind him of his place. However, the boys now were held off by a girl who had suddenly rushed over and had thrown herself in front of the fallen Izuku, arms spread out, a protective stance to keep him safe. The 4-year-old girl had been wandering about, exploring the park when she heard the sounds of yelling and harmful words being shouted, and came across this very scene. She moved before her mind could register fully what she was doing. She couldn't tell you why, just that it felt right. Izuku's vision was blurry from the previous beating, so he couldn't see his guardian angel as the young girl was holding the bullies off, who were at first stunned to see a complete stranger suddenly jump between them and their victim, before their leader yelled at her to mind her own business and to piss off. Which, frankly, she ignored and told them to stop hurting the boy. He's just a worthless freak, one boy shouts. Quirkless. He's only good for being our punching bag, a third said. So what if he's quirkless? He's still human. She yelled at them. That worthless Deku wants to be a hero, but that will never happen. The blonde argued with his red eyes glaring at her. We're beating that nonsense out of that worthless bastard. The way he spouted those words, especially the word Deku, made Izuku flinch as he cowered. He hated this. He wanted to be a hero, and yet all he could do was lie on the ground while someone else had to protect him. Because of how everyone treated him in school, he expected the girl to either walk away or join them after finding out his quirklessness, but what she said next surprised not only him but also his assailants. He can be a hero. Katsuki did not like that some extra was bold to protect the worthless Deku. If the feral growl was any indication, he can do whatever he wants, and if he wants to be a hero, then he can. And you can't tell him otherwise. Izuku knew the signs when Katsuki was getting angry, as loud popping was filling the air as Katsuki let out a cry of anger as he charged at his savior. But before he could attack anyone, another, much older, female voice shouted with an authoritative voice, "Boy! What's going on here? Oh shit! Run!" The other boys shouted and began running. Katsuki had skidded to a halt. Having been caught red-handed in mid-use of his quirk and attempting to attack someone, he and his crew quickly made their escape as Izuku heard 3 sets of footsteps making their way to him. "Are you okay, kid?" the older female voice asked as his vision started to clear. He gazed up to see who both his savior and the woman was, but to his surprise he only saw hollow clothes, except for a man whose face was wrapped in bandages. Izuku shook off his surprise and nodded shakily. "Why, yeah, I'm fine." The woman, who he now realized was wearing a police uniform, reached out and gently touched his shoulder. The action caused Izuku to gasp in pain and the woman to retract her hand. "What happened, Toru, sweetie?" the man said. The girl who saved him bounced over to him. The blonde meanie and his friends were being stupid and making fun of him for a stupid reason. "Daddy. Toru, don't call people stupid." The police woman scolded his savior, who he now knew as Toru. "But mommy," Toru whined to her mother, "they were being mean to him for being quirkless." There was silence as her parent processed that was said as Izuku tried to curl up into a ball to try and disconnect from the world. "She's right, honey," Toru's dad said as he moved over to Izuku, inspecting his injuries. "If they think it's fine to do this to someone for something as quirklessness, then they truly are stupid." "Fukuya?" Toru's mom gasped. "Psycho. I don't think I need to remind you of what we see on scenes that involve people who wear quirkless. Toru's dad, Fukuya, spoke soberly. Any indication that his wife was going to chastise him for what he said died as his reasoning came up. Despite the now depressing atmosphere that the two adults were exuding, Toru ran over to the green-haired boy and extended her hand. Hi. My name's Toru. Toru Hagakure. Izuku shakily took the hand and shook it. My name's Izuku Midoriya. Nice to meet you, Izzy. Izzy. Toru continued to cry on his shoulder, her embrace becoming tighter as the memories of him and her playing in her parents' back garden, them watching movies shrouded by soft pillows and plushies, them wanting nothing more than to get into UA, the day where she and her parents had to move to Tokyo. Izuku stopped caring about the fact that a girl was hugging him, about what the soft things that were pressing into him were, about Bakugo and All Might. Instead, he was focused on the fact that after years of waiting, his friend was back in his arms and he was determined to never let her go again. He shakily snaked his arms around her as he spoke. Ru? When he felt her embrace tighten, he crushed her in the same bear hug she trapped him in as he finally let his tears flow. Izzy. I'm so sorry I forgot Ru, I'm so sorry, Izuku mumbled over and over as he and Toru collapsed to the floor, still in each other's embrace. It's okay, Izzy, it's okay. Toru reassured her friend as she gently stroked his forest of hair. I'm sorry I also forgot. But it's fine now, we're back now. I'm never letting you go. Me neither. They stayed like that on the floor, just enjoying the scent of the other, completely unaware of the three adults that were watching through the door. Let's leave them be, Inko whispered to the other two as she quietly closed the door. The other two nodded and made their way to the living room determined to catch up on what happened between them. Hey Inko. Psycho spoke with an air of mischief, getting the attention of the green-haired mother who probably knew what her friend was going to say. Is our bet still on? Inko stared at her for a moment before a sheet-eating grin spread across her face. 7,000 yen that they become a couple before you. 4,000 yen that it's after you, eh? Why do you two insist on betting our children's love lives? Fukuya sighed at his wife and friend's shenanigans. Because they're cute. Both Inko and Psycho yelled. Fukuya just sighed in defeat as he sent a quick prayer to both Izuku and his daughter for their sanity. Rabbit sat on top of a two-story building, and the emotions from yesterday were still present. He finally reunited with his best friend, and he couldn't be happier. What happened 6 days ago couldn't have gone any better in his opinion. They caught up on old times, ate Inko's godly cooking, joked, and he and Toru ended it with watching movies on the couch while surrounded by pillows and plushies until they passed out. This did leave them very embarrassed when they woke up snuggled against each other. The day after they got a call from Aldera that school would be closed down for the week, though no reason was given, so they spent all day just hanging out and enjoying each other's company, trying to make up for the lost time. Izuku was extremely happy that she still kept the rabbit he gave her all those years ago as he did with her cat, but sadly the day came to a close and they went their separate ways for now. Throughout this entire time, he hadn't forgotten what Akiharu had said, how to contact Midas through the dark net. He was merely biding his time. He knew that after Akiharu proper, permanent arrest that contacting Midas with a proposition would look suspicious, ultimately exposing himself. He won't get a second chance at this. He knew he needed to act fast, but not too fast. Today, Izuku thought it would be nice to do just some light patrolling before going to the meeting place where he would hopefully be teaching Toru. Did he expect her to show up? No, but he hoped she would. It was at this time that something caught his attention. There was smoke from a nearby apartment complex. He jumped from the building he was on to the other and started to run. As he made his way closer and closer, the more the smell of something burning filled his nostrils. When he finally arrived at the building, he was greeted to the scene of it on fire, officers surrounding the place, firefighters trying to help where they could and escorting civilians out of the burning building, medical personnel helping and Himi lady helping where she could. Izuku took in what was happening as the medics tended to those who suffered injuries. It looked like things were being handled by those on site, but with the previous assumption with the situation with Bakugo where he thought everything was handled, he decided to hang around this time to make sure things went smoothly. His decision sadly paid off when a small boy, no older than 7, tried to run into the burning building but was blocked by some police officers. He tried to break free while shouting at them, My friend is still in there. Please. Air filter. With a yell of the command and an audible click to signify that the air filter was active, he jumped down to the ground and bolted into the burning building, only vaguely registering the gasps of shock and yells of his name as he got further into the building. Even with the air filter active, the smell of smoke and the heat from the fire was still affecting him. At this point he started to regret wearing a hoodie and leather vest as part of his costume. At least he had air conditioning in his helmet. Hello? Can anyone hear me? Izuku yelled as he ran from floor to floor and kicked down doors to the various apartments. With the enhanced hearing his antenna gave him, he hoped that he may hear something, which paid off when he detected a faint cough of a little girl coming from the top floor. When he eventually made it to the top floor and kicked the door off its hinges, he was greeted by the sight of a girl huddled in a ball near a corner, roughly the same age as her friend outside. She had long silver hair with black tips, freckles dotted her rosy cheeks and bright blue eyes. Her gaze shifted from the floor towards him, her eyes widened when she gazed up at him. Why, your rabbit? She wished out in mixed awe and fear, though he could tell she wasn't afraid of him, but more of the situation. He made his way to her, treading lightly so as to not scare her more than she was already and not upset the currently burning floor. When he made it to her, he crouched down to be at her level and spoke with a soft voice. You seem to know who I am? Why ya? I'm a fan of yours. You're a big inspiration to me, she spoke, trying not to fangirl at him. He recognized this and inwardly chuckled in embarrassment while wondering if this was how some heroes felt when he asked for autographs. What's your name, little one? Ayaki. Izuku had to suppress the urge to do a double take when she said her name. He never really expected to meet her, at least like this. Thank you for the letter, Mr. Rabbit, and thank you for saving Big Brother. Daddy didn't tell me why you had to save Big Brother, but I'm happy you did. I would be sad if he was gone. Izuku smiled underneath his helmet as he heard A admit this. I'm happy I got to save your brother too. Now. He stood up and extended a hand to her. Let's get you out of here. She was about to take it when a piece of falling debris crashed onto the floor, scaring her enough to retract her hand and curl up into a ball once again. Shit, we need to get out of here fast. This place is falling apart, Izuku thought to himself as he quietly scanned the room before looking back at AIA. But she's too scared to move right now. A thought popped into his head. It would be risky, but it seemed to be the best option. Isaisi. Ai looked up when she heard a click coming from Rabbit Helmet and was greeted by two emerald eyes looking into her blue ones, a soft smile upon the unmasked face of her idol. Rabbit. Your helmet. It's fine, Izuku spoke gently, one of his gloved hands reaching up and softly petting her head, his smile widening when she leaned into his touch, before retracting his hand and placing his helmet on her head. I want you to wear this. It will keep you safe. But what about Dash? I have a balaclava in my bag. Don't worry about me. He presented his hand once more and gradually he took it. He quietly reached into his bag and pulled out the black balaclava and slid it over his face before lifting her into his arms and bolting it down the stairs. Now the smoke was starting to get to him now that he no longer had an air filter to keep fresh oxygen in his system, but if it would keep the little girl in his arms safe then he didn't care. Yu Takayama, or as most people know her as My Lady, was not having a good day. The day was going like any other until the building caught on fire. She rushed to help where she could, but with her quirk, she could only do so much. Then Rabbit appeared out of nowhere and ran right into the burning apartment to save a kid. Seeing him do that made her giddy for when he got back out. A few minutes later he sprinted out of the burning apartment building and quietly handed the little girl in his arms and wearing his helmet over to the medics as he started coughing. Hearing his pained coughing, two medics came to assist him, but he turned them down. And no, her and the others first, he said raspily. He sat by one of the ambulances and watched them treat the girl he saved, who was also being hugged by the boy who begged them to save her and any other civilians for their injuries. He was just happy that he got her out if the smile he wore under his balaclava was any indication. She walked closer to him and tossed a bottle of water. Catching it, he looked up to see her smiling at him. Thank you, he said as he washed his mouth out with the beverage before taking a swig. No problem, Rabbit, she said as she sat next to him. Least I could do when you rushed in to save that girl. Rabbit smiled lightly as he continued to watch the girl get treated and talk excitedly to her friend about how she got to wear his helmet. His gaze then shifted to the firefighters putting out the flames. Hey MD lady? If it's not too much trouble, how did this building catch on fire? He asked. Last I checked, they don't do that on their own. Endeavor, she groaned in frustration, sighing at the end. He was chasing a villain and let a few fireballs let loose and hit the building, didn't even stop and just kept chasing them. Luckily I was there to help where I could. She guessed Rabbit could relate with her frustration about the number 2 hero as he had his own set of problems with him. For instance, whenever Endeavor was on the news, the flaming hero would badmouth and try to slander the vigilante every opportunity he got. This all stemmed from when Endeavor was trying to capture him, but the vigilante retaliated by spraying the hero with fire suppression foam that he cares about with him. The funniest sheet you had ever seen. Why aren't you trying to arrest me, Emmy lady? Rabbit inquired. Well, most of us at the bottom just see you as one of us, she explained while shrugging her shoulders. Apart from the ones that think if we catch a famous vigilante it'll boost our ranking. Rabbit nodded, his emerald eyes stared at her for a moment, seemingly looking for a lie, but once he saw she was telling the truth, he calmed down a bit. That was until he saw something in her expression and just sighed, not in frustration but more embarrassment. Just say it. Could I have an autograph? You asked as she handed him a pen and paper. A sheepish smile and a light blush spread across her face as she asked. Why would a pro hero want a signature from a vigilante? He questioned tiredly as he scribbled his signature. To be honest, it's because you reminded me of my dad, she explained. Rabbit stopped for a moment to give her his full attention. My dad was an insurance officer for a few school campuses around the area. He was kind, helpful, and never backed down from an overwhelming challenge. Try to hurt one of his family, and may God help you. You talk like he's not here anymore. Because he isn't, she revealed. He went to a campus of art and saw that a building was on fire. 3 of the kids were stuck inside, and seeing that the firefighters weren't there yet, he jumped to save them. He rescued all 3, but he couldn't get out in time before the place exploded. I am sorry if I brought up some bad memories, Rabbit tried to apologize, but you just brushed it off. It's fine, it's nice remembering Dad. She gave him a soft smile. I was, 10 at the time. And Mom raised me since. We were living paycheck to paycheck and I want my mom to live a comfortable life. It's one of the reasons I became a hero. He nodded at her with an empathetic smile. She was about to question it before the 2 kids ran to him and gave him his helmet back. Here you go, Mr. Rabbit. Both kids say. He smiled kindly at them, taking his helmet back and putting it back on. Thank you, AIA, Anne. Kazumi, sir, Kazumi said with a mock salute as Rabbit took in his appearance. The boy had olive green eyes and short, slightly messy gray hair. He wore round-rimmed glasses and had a screw nut sticking through the left side of his head and peaks through the other side. Thank you, Buichi, Rabbit said before asking. I already know what A wants to be, but what about you? Are you also planning to enter the hero course? No, Buichi shook his head. I don't like fighting and my quirk isn't one for the hero course anyway. I plan to enter the support course. Really? What's your quirk? My quirk is called Blueprint. It allows me to create and print a physical blueprint of any device I can think of. The drawback to the quirk is that I have to build the device in question physically and my quirk requires paper to use it, the boy revealed before jabbing his thumb in AIA direction. I want to be her mechanic because someone has to watch over her. I don't need to be watched over. An embarrassed A exclaimed, her face completely red while punching him in the shoulder. Completely ignoring his friend shouting at and hitting him, Buichi continued to speak. My only problem is I don't know where to start to try and help. Well, you two want to know something? The vigilante asked. The kids nodded their heads vigorously before Rabbit leaned in and whispered something to them. You couldn't hear what was being said, but whatever it was caused the 2 kids to gain a look of shock and awe, more so, and what appeared to be tears of joy pricked her eyes. Rabbit leaned back and chuckled at their looks. So, with that information of what my quirk status is, I'm sure you can figure it out. Before anyone could say anything more, Rabbit tackled the 2 kids to the ground. Get down. Just then a fireball exploded near where Rabbit's head used to be. Regaining her senses, you looked around to see what caused it, only to see the flaming beard of the number 2 hero. Rabbit. The number 2 hero barked. Your days of vigilantism are over. Oh, for the love of God, this grease fire, Rabbit mumbled before looking at Endeavor. Are you still but hurt about me dousing you in fire suppression foam to your face? Surrender now, you weakling. Geez, get new material, you overground matchstick. Endeavor was about to ready another attack when the civilian stepped in front of the fire hero and protected Rabbi, AIA and Buichi at the front of the pack. Go. You said, herself in the crowd of people protecting the vigilante, unless he wants to be charged with hurting civilians he won't do anything. Rabbit hesitated for a moment before nodding. Thank you, he said before firing his grappling hook at a building and zipped to it, leaving a furious matchstick. Damn you, Rabbit. The hero blazed before the vigilante threw a canister at his face that immediately doused him with fire suppression foam. Toru didn't know what to think as she made her way to the location provided to her. And who would blame her after being saved by a vigilante that she didn't really know and finding out your childhood friend that you vaguely remembered was living next door to you, but now said vigilante wanted to meet you because they thought she could use some pointers. Every logical part of her brain was telling her to not go and stay away from the meeting place, but the side of her brain that told her it was a fun idea to mix ice cream with mayonnaise when she was 14 was saying what was the worst that could happen. Her parents knew that she would be exploring and that she would ring every 2 hours, so what could go wrong? She did also have to admit that she wanted to know more about Rabbit and how he operated. Stepping into the warehouse, she found it to be relatively clean and spacious for being supposedly abandoned. Crates and boxes were placed around like it was some weird parkour track and a small generator to keep power going. The most odd thing that caught her attention was a plushie of a narwhal sitting on a crate in the middle of the room. Curiosity got the better of her and she stepped closer to it, but nearly jumped out of her skin when the door to the warehouse slammed shut and the lights went out with the only light illuminating the room was from the roof windows. She continued to get closer to the stuffed sea creature while occasionally stopping and frantically looking around when she heard movement or a clatter of a pipe hitting the floor. She was just about to reach the plush when she was quickly knocked to the floor and with the blunt end of a knife held to her throat. Pinning her down was the vigilante that snuck the letter to her and requested to train her. Despite not seeing his face, she could feel his eyes staring into her soul. Dead? Ichicha? If I was a villain, you'd be dead right now, Rabbit said as he got off her and held his hand out to her to help her up. We need to work on that if you plan to continue seeking my help. Okay, but why did you do this? Toru questioned. Because I wanted to see what you would do, Rabbit answered. I wanted to see what you would do if someone tried leading you into a trap. You failed, by the way. How do I get better then? She asked as the vigilante led her to a training mat. You'd said you would help, so what should I do then? If I told you how, not only would you not learn but I would know what you'd try and do. You must figure it out yourself. Rabbit pointed to one side of the mat as he stood on the other. Get some scratches in before we have a spare. I want to see what you've got. Something was nagging Toru as she did her warm-up. It reached its peak when she stepped onto the mat. If I can ask, why did you leave a plush out there? Incentives, was what he responded with. But after receiving a confused sound from her he elaborated, an acquaintance of ours told me about your love of cute stuffed animals. So if you choose to come back every time you enter the building I want you to try and get it. If you succeed then your training is over. If you fail to you continue your training, got it? Toru nodded along with the vigilante's explanation, though she wanted to know who this acquaintance of theirs was that told him about her plush addiction. She now really wanted to prove herself to him. They spared for a few minutes and every time he knocked her onto the mat. All right, I think we're done here, Rabbit said as he helped her up for the 12th time. So? Toru trailed tiredly. What now? For now, go home and get some rest. If you wish to continue your training you know where to find me, the rabbit-themed vigilante said. But what you need a lot of is strength and combat training. I'll see what I can do for you. Have a good rest, Hagakure. Toru nodded and made her way out of the building as she contemplated if she should continue going back, but there was one thing that bugged her that she couldn't escape from. Why did he feel so familiar to her? Again. Izuku watched as Toru groaned as she picked herself back up after being tossed onto the training mat for the 5th time in a row. Today's lesson was about proper hand-to-hand combat with an opponent that could see her. He explained to her that a function of his helmet could give him both heat and night vision and explained further that she had to knock him onto the floor and she wins. If he knocked her onto the mat she had to get back up and do it again. Izuku was surprised that she came back for more training but was ultimately happy that he got to have more time with his friend. Toru hit the mat once more. She attempted to sweep his feet but didn't have a backup plan if he jumped. Izuku extended his hand to help her up. Take a break for now. If it makes it better, you did better than most. Gee, that makes me feel so much better, she said with a sarcastic tone before giggling to herself. The vigilante smiled under his helmet as he heard her giggle to herself, his chest feeling light and a light heat to his cheeks as he joined her laughter, but was soon stopped when he noticed a large black feather fall from the ceiling. He looked up and saw two massive black ravens looking down on him and Toru and immediately knew what was going on as he turned back to his friend. Hagakure, take 5 and get a drink. The invisible woman was taken aback by the sudden shift in his tone, going from happy and joking to serious. Is everything all right, Rabbit? Yeah. He looked up to see the birds weren't there anymore as he started walking to the stairs that led to the roof. Just have a meeting to attend. When he got to the roof, he saw the back of a woman who wore a red leather coat with a hood that came to just below her breasts, black pants, a backpack, brown steel-toed boots, and steel knuckle gloves. She had a helmet with a full triangular visor that was a gift from Rabbit that projects holograms to her to type what she wants, send information, and express her emotions on the screen. The woman turned around and jumped up excitedly to meet him as a smiling emoji displayed itself on the visor while a holographic text box came up. Hello again, Rabbit. Hi, Hugan. How's the helmet? Doing fine. No problems whatsoever. She texted as she booked the side of her helmet. That's good to hear, my friend, Rabbit said. Izuku learned over time that Hugan was mute and could not speak, so she often either had cards or a notepad with her at all times. Rabbit felt bad and spent a good amount of time making her a helmet that could help her. After that, the two became fast friends and would often do or learn things for each other. One time Izuku helped her with a villain takedown at her request, and in return he asked her to teach him sign language. Hugan was also a fellow vigilante but worked more as an info gatherer, not to say she couldn't handle herself in a fight but preferred to stay away from them. Rabbit was about to say something else before the second raven flew down and landed on a box next to Munin. Oh, look how big you've gotten. He gushed over the bird, who seemed to both enjoy the attention and had a look of smug satisfaction in his posture. What are you feeding him, Hugan? Just the regular amount, she shrugged, though considering he's part of my quirk it may have a part in his size. It was true, as Rabbit had the privilege of knowing her real quirk, Raven Spirit. The quirk allows her to both communicate with her pet Munin and allows herself to transform into a raven herself. So what's the reason you're here? Rabbit asked as he pets Munin, who let out some happy chirps and leaned into his touch. What? Can't visit the vigilante I trust the most, the one I trust with what my quirk truly is, and him trusting me with the secret that he's quirkless, without him expecting me to have information to give? Hugan took on an exaggerated posture of shock and betrayal as the imaging on her helmet turned to a crying emoji. You wound me, Rabbit? The bunny-themed vigilante shook his head at the over-exaggerating woman in front of him, but he did chuckle when she finally burst into silent laughter. Forgive me, but you rarely just show up for a chat. Fair. Her text exclaimed as she walked over to him and sat on the box Munin was on. I'm here for a few reasons. 1. How was the tip about Jiren? Sorry, again I couldn't give you any info on Midas or Citadel. It's all right, you did your best with the information you had. Rabbit shook his head. He didn't know where Midas was or how to get to him, but he did give me a clue about someone who could. That clue was correct when I found him on same night. But you don't trust him, she stated as if knowing exactly what he felt, like he has ulterior motives, like a salesman trying to sell you shoes 3 sizes too small. Exactly. Figured as such. I got the same feeling when I met him once. I'll keep an eye on him and see if he is up to no good, Hugan said. The second reason why I'm here is that I know that, alongside trying to destroy Midas, your investigating trigger, there's a delivery that's about to be transported not too far from here. I was gonna tell you about it, but I saw you training that invisible woman. Rabbit could feel her wiggling her eyebrows and her teasing grin. So, who's the lucky lady? Just a friend. Rabbit stuttered, his face flustered from her comment. While he cares about Hugan, who often acted like an older sister to him in his times of hardship or when days when he didn't want to be alone, he also hated her for comments like this because, like any older sibling, she would tease him to hell and back. It didn't help that she was, in fact, for years older than him. He tried to not give her the satisfaction of seeing him fluttered by her comments, but he never was good with women and she would always get a rise out of him in one way or another. Sometimes his body betrayed him and would react before he could stop, and she could tease him more for it. Toru is just someone I'm training, Izuku said, and before you ask, she's not becoming a vigilante like us, she's training to become a hero. Training to become a hero? That seems kind of risky, don't you think? Hugan questioned. To be fair, she did have a point about training someone who would try and capture you one day. So, being the person he was, Izuku explained his reasoning. People nowadays are too reliant on their quirks, and it gets people and themselves ended because once a situation comes up that their quirk is not suited for, they give up and wait for someone else to do it. She's a dear friend of mine who I refuse to lose her again. Hugan knew about some of Rabbit's past. Not all of it, of course, but to be fair, neither did she. But she knew that he had a childhood friend who moved away. So judging from how protective he is of making sure his invisible friend wouldn't die, she could put two and two together. So, you gonna check out that transport? Hugan questioned, changing the topic so then the depressing mood could change. Izuku shook his head while looking over the city. I can't just leave her, not when she just got here. They sat in silence for a few moments until Hugan jumped off the box and pointed her finger at him while displaying her excitement as the text box read, "Why don't you go and I'll look over her training? I'm no slouch when it comes to hand either, remember? Yes, I am painfully aware of what you can do with either your fists or that collapsible bow staff for yours," he said as he rubbed the left side of his ribs, "but are you sure you're okay with doing that? You've done so much for me," she texted while her hand idly rubbed her helmet. "It's only fair I do this for you." Sighing, Izuku put his hands in the air. "Fine, I'll go check it out while you teach Toru, okay?" Receiving a nod from his fellow vigilante, they made their way to Toru, who was currently sitting down while drinking some cold water. She spotted the two and got confused. Rabbit sir, who's this?" "This," he gestured to Hugan, who held up a peace sign with her left hand while Munin stood on her right shoulder, "is Hugan and her pet Munin. She is a vigilante like me and will be looking after you while I step out." "Is something wrong?" "Just something that came up and that you don't need to worry yourself with. Hugan will be taking over your hand-to-hand training today. She's mute but her helmet can produce holographic text boxes," Izuku explained while he made his way to the door. "Be good you two, and behave Hugan." "I mean it." And with that he left and got to work. Well, ain't this a surprise? Rabbit thought as he gazed down from a stack of old shining containers where the transport was located. What made it interesting was the fact that it was taking place in a scrapyard. I've never fought in a scrapyard before. Oh, how exciting. What made this even better was that the people guarding the place were the people who stole Toru's purse, so he could beat them a little more than what he did last time. He jumped from container to anything that was stable enough to support his weight until he made his way over to some stacked cars where a pair of guards holding pistols were stationed with their backs turned to the cars. One of them had a red shirt and the other had a blue shirt. They were just standing there overlooking everything until the one in red spoke. "Hey." "Yeah." Blue responded. "Do you ever wonder why red was cut off when Rabbit threw a piece of scrap at one of the cars farthest from him, making a metallic clang? What the hell was that?" They stood there for a few moments before Blue elbowed Red. "Hey, go check that out." "Are you effing crazy?" Red shouted at his colleague while grabbing his shirt. "Do you know what I'm wearing?" "A red shirt?" Blue shrugged. "Just a red shirt. Do you know who gets their sheet rocked first?" Receiving no verbal response and a lost look on Blue's face, Red continued, "People wearing red shirts." Blue sighed. "You can't be serious. Just go check it out. It might just be a cat. I had 3 friends who wore red shirts sent to hospital by Miruko. So no, I'm not doing it." Blue threw his hands in the air in accepted frustration. "Fine. While I'm gone you try and find some balls." And with nothing more to say, he left his colleague to search for the noise. As it turned out, there was a cat near where Izuku threw the price of scrap, with a sign of frustration at not only being proven right but also having his time wasted. Blue made his way back to his position. When he got there, though he was red on the floor and his gun and radio far away from him, Blue rushed to his friend's side and checked him over. There were some fist marks on his face and some electrical burns to his arm. He was about to call it in but heard knuckles being cracked behind him. He turned around slowly and came face to face with Rabbit. Blue gulped and squeaked a single word, "Mommy?" Rabbit grabbed Blue by the collar and slammed him into a wall. "Well, this seems familiar, don't it? Now like last time, tell me about Trigger." F you. Blue attempted to throw a punch but Rabbit blocked it and slammed him onto the ground instead, putting his foot on the thug's head while having his arm twisted. "Tell me. My patience is running thin with this," Rabbit growled as he applied pressure on Blue's arm and head, causing him to shout in pain. "All right. I'll talk. Blue tapped out as he begged for it to stop. Izuku complied and took the pressure off a bit. "We don't know who the manufacturer is. We just get it and distribute it around Japan. All I know is that it's Yakuza." There was a pause for a moment as Rabbit watched his movements, but after a while he responded to the downed man, "If you're lying, I'll make it hurt more." "Make what hurt dash?" Blue was cut off when the vigilante stamped on his head and knocked the guy out. When the police arrived at the location thanks to an anonymous tip, they found every thug there tied up with a chain, bruises on them and a note saying, "Happy birthday. Hope you enjoy your gifts, Rabbit." Izuku sighed in frustration as he made his way back to the location where he left Toru and Hugan. He interrogated everyone there about who was selling Trigger and all of them said the same thing. "We don't know." It infuriated Izuku to no end that his chances at finding out about who was making and distributing the drug lead to a dead end. The only new piece of information was that it was a Yakuza group who was making it. He made his way there only to see Hugan and Mun in there. The female vigilante saw him and made her way over to him, sent Hagakure home early. "She may have some new bruises and a fear of sticks now though." Izuku sighed and hung his head as he read her message. This was just what he needed after coming back empty-handed. He looked up to see her scratching the back of her head and in a posture that sent the message of, "I forgot to behave and I'm sorry. It would be funny if it wasn't for the failure of today." Huggins saw this and asked, "What wrong? Was the information wrong?" "No, your information was correct. It's more of the fact that they don't know who makes it." Rabbit shook his head. "So either they are extremely loyal and are keeping their mouths shut or they genuinely don't know. The only info I got was that it's Yakuza." Hugan took all this information in and slowly took on a posture similar to her friend. She sighed and put her finger where the bridge of nose would be. "In other words, we're nowhere close to stopping Trigger than we were hours ago." "Great." Munin flew over to the two frustrated vigilantes and got between them and acted like a stress-petting reliever, though if it was due to a genuine sense of wanting to help or getting more pets no one would know. "I just feel like I took a giant step back in progress," Izuku lamented. Hugan rubbed his back caringly. They stayed like that for what felt like hours before Izuku saw a text box appear in front of him. "Maybe take a break from the Trigger case. You're already training Hagakure and you took a giant leap with your hunt for Midas." She moved his head to look at her. "Focus on those two for now. Despite how we feel about it, Trigger isn't going anywhere anytime soon." "Yeah, you're right, Hugan. Thank you." The female vigilante brought him into a hug. They stayed there for a bit before breaking. "When are you going to contact Midas?" Hugan questioned. "Next week, but I need your expertise on something." Hugan jumped excitedly. "Anything to help. What do you need? How good are you at forging a fake identity in life?" Rabbit questioned. Despite not seeing her face, he could tell she had a face-splitting grin. In a dark office room sat a lone figure writing up some documents and the total amount of money they either spent or gained that month. A single light illuminated the desk and papers as a white closed hand was only visible. The door to the dark room opened and in stepped a man dressed in a dark black cloak with the hood up as it obscured his face. "Lord Midas, something has just come up that I think you might find interesting." The figure that sat in the darkness stopped for a moment before speaking. "And what might that be, Sharon?" "We got someone who wishes to join us." The cloaked man, Sharon, revealed while sliding a file to Midas. The file contained a picture of a person with black shaggy hair and big red eyes. He said his name is Akatani Mikumo. "We did some digging and his quirk may seem to be weak but could prove useful." It says that his quirk is called analysis. It grants the user the ability to understand the quirk or actions of anyone he watches, Midas mused, while handing Sharon back the file. "Send an underling to meet him at a park in Muzutafu in 3 days. I'll let you pick the time. Let's see how well he does." "Of course, my lord." The cloaked man bowed before leaving, but as soon as he reached the door he stopped and looked at his boss. "May I ask, sir, but why are you writing reports in the dark?" There was a minute of silence before Midas spoke with a sigh. The light bulb broke and I sent Demeter to fetch a new one, but she has not returned yet. Sharon sighed in frustration. Demeter was quite well known for taking her time when she thinks it's a waste of her talents or when she could be doing something important. She is a brilliant enforcer for Citadel, but it really was taxing on everyone's patience. I'll see where she is, my lord, after I give your orders. And with that, Midas's second's hand closed the door, leaving the head of Citadel alone as he thought back to the file. Depending on what happens, we might be able to use him for the children. Maybe then we'll get some progress done faster than Akiharu Akinasuke could accomplish. He's finally done it. Izuku had finally made contact with Citadel. He got an email to meet at a park a few days ago at around 4 in the afternoon. Naturally, Izuku was nervous when the time eventually came, as he didn't want to risk exposing himself. He had to thank Hugan for what she did for him in creating his fake identity as Akatani Mikumo. According to her, it was a pain in the ass to try and create the information that seemed realistic to not tip them off. He had waited a long time for this moment and he didn't want to waste it. Izuku quickly checked what he was supposed to do before meeting the person. He went to the park and looked behind a bush that was in front of a tree and saw that there was a package that sat there. He picked it up before looking left, where he was a man sitting on the bench that he was supposed to meet at. The man was wearing a purple tank top and black jeans, sunglasses and a face mask. Izuku sat next to the man before handing over the package, and without looking, the man spoke. When you look at how society views the weak and feeble, it really is quite disheartening, especially when those with weak quirks could be quite powerful. Indeed, I often try to give advice on how to use their quirks better. They tell me to save my breath and that they don't need help from someone with a weak quirk like you, Izuku said as he looked around the park. They could be so much better with them, but instead squander their potential in favor of being on top. We believe that the strong should lead, but that the weak could show potential. The man gestured to some of the people unaware of the two. Look around and use the quirk that those call weak. Tell me what you see. Izuku looked around for a moment, trying to think on who to examine, but he wanted to make an impression on them. So against his better judgment, he decided to put his analysis skills to the test on the one person that they would least expect. Midas? Quirk unknown. Izuku started, getting the surprised attention of the man next to him. But I think that his name is more literal than metaphorical. The man said nothing, so Izuku continued. When people think of the name Midas, often their thoughts go to thinking that he is referring to himself as a king. But I think it might be more of the fact that he is referring to the legend of King Midas's curse. 5-point finger contact that turns people into gold. The reason for the finger contact is that in legend Midas had to touch something, and in modern society touching with 5 fingers is the most common, Izuku explained. But judging by the fact that the gold market hasn't crashed, he is either spending it sparingly or... The disguised vigilante looked at the man in purple, who had a trickle of sweat on his forehead. It's not real gold, fool's gold to be more precise. This was a big risk that he was playing, as Izuku had no idea how Citadel, or Midas for that matter, would react to him trying to guess their leader's quirk. The other problem was that he could be wrong about Midas's quirk, and it could be just a name. Right now Izuku was putting his false identity on the line, and one screw-up could cost him his only chance at getting to the man who ended his father. After a moment of suspenseful silence, the man stood up and spoke without looking at him. Well, contact you in a few days. And with that, the man in purple left, leaving Izuku to himself in the park. After making sure that he was gone, he let out the breath he didn't know he was holding. It took everything he had to not freak out when the man said nothing, but it seems that it was fine. Now the ball was in Midas's court, and all Izuku could do was wait until he got the confirmation. Mentally drained from the suspense, he got up and headed back home, hoping Toru was there and they could watch a movie or something. When he made it back, he opened the door and called to his mom that he was home, but when he got no reply, he stepped further in and called again. He saw Inko in the kitchen cleaning some plates and utensils while having headphones on, listening to music. Realizing that she couldn't hear him, Izuku reached out and was about to tap her shoulder when she snapped into action. Before he knew it, she spun around and grabbed his arm before kicking his legs from under him. She came down with him and pinned him with her knee to her back. She also used her telekinesis to grab one of her sharp knives to bring it close to his head, but upon realizing that he was her son, Inko immediately let go and put the knife back where it came from. "Oh my God, Izuku!" she yelled as she helped him up and hugged him. "I'm so sorry, baby. I thought you were an intruder." "It's okay, Mom," Izuku said while hugging her back. I shouldn't have snuck up on you like that. This wasn't the first time something like this happened with his mom, and he honestly wondered why he kept forgetting that she could do this. She was the same slim young woman he remembered when he was younger and still had the muscles and strength to prove it too. He wondered how she kept in shape, as he had never seen her step into a gym in his life, but he wasn't about to pry into his mother's life. Though he did wonder where she learned these moves. And you're sure about this report, Sharon? Midas asked while looking out a one-way window over his operation. He had been informed by his second-in-command about the interaction with the underling they sent and Akatani Mikumo, but when it was reported that he actually guessed Midas's quirk and its drawback, it greatly surprised him. It also greatly worried him that if he could guess his quirk, then what would stop him from going to the police or heroes and informing them? Indeed, my lord, this Mikumo is quite intelligent, and if he were brought on, imagine what we could accomplish, Sharon said. His boss remained quiet as he pondered his options and opinions about what had happened. Sharon was right in the fact that Mikumo could be an asset to them and surely speed things along with the children. But on the other hand, if he could guess what his quirk was with very little to go on, it could result in him losing everything he worked for. After formulating his response, the Lord of Citadel finally spoke. I am undecided of what our course of action should be at this point in time, Sharon. We shall leave it for now until I have come to a decision. I understand, my lord. The robed man bowed. A decision like this with someone guessing the quirk you closely guard is a difficult one. I respect your judgment. Midas nodded and waved his second-in-command off, indicating that he wished to be left alone with his thoughts about what happened, his gaze never leaving from what he was looking at through the window. Your intelligence and quirk is quite fascinating and dangerous, young Mikumo, Midas thought to himself. In the hands of the heroes it could lead to the downfall of many villains and our operations, but in my hands it could lead us to our goal and be our greatest weapon. Midas hummed to himself when he thought more about the positives about having the young man working for him. I'll leave it for now, but I'm looking forward to what you could bring to the table, little man. He chuckled and grinned to himself as he looked at the rows upon rows of rooms that held children of all types, and the profit you could bring us for our child soldiers. Ow! Toru grunted as she got another face full of training mat. Today was more hand-to-hand training today with her Vigilante teacher, and she hated every part of it, though was glad that it wasn't Hugan. She seriously thought that she could make it to the stuffed animal today by taking off her clothes and creeping towards it while ducking behind cover for good measure, but she didn't even make it halfway through before she felt a gun to her head signify that she was caught. She just couldn't figure out how he was able to tell where she was and how he could sneak up on her. Though her mind has been distracted as of late with everything that has happened, a few weeks ago Aldra was apparently under investigation for malpractice and Quirkus teachings. All the teachers and principal were found guilty and promptly arrested. When Toru did some digging, she found out that it all stemmed from when Rabbit exposed Bakugo in front of the news. That day was not a good day for her when she thought about it. If she just stayed behind with Izuku that day, she could have been there for him. This was besides the point. It was later revealed that they were followers of Destro and his MLA and wanted the future generations to see the right point of view. The school itself wasn't shut down as temporary teaching staff were brought in, but it was made clear that this would be the final year of the Aldra school system. Another thing was that Bakugo never showed up to school after the announcement. Izuku and Inko had no idea, and when they tried to talk to Mitsuki, she was tight-lipped about it. Though that didn't stop his aunt from profusely apologizing for her son's behavior and treatment throughout the years towards Izuku. She couldn't help but smile when she thought about her long-lost childhood friend. Not a day went by where they weren't with each other and doing stuff together. She remembered just last night where they gathered all the pillows and plushies and made a small soft fort while watching a movie. Toru didn't remember what happened after the movie, as she just remembered waking up with her cuddled up into Izuku's chest while on the floor with a blanket over them. She also remembered that warm feeling in her chest when she woke up like that. The invisible girl looked to the vigilante who was grabbing some water for her and couldn't help but draw parallels to her friend. Both were determined and had a strong attitude towards heroics. Both here smart as hell, both here kind to everyone, and both wanted to do good in the world. This drew a question to Toru. She knew what Izuku's answer was, but not Rabbit's. With Izuku it was a given, as he wanted to prove that anyone, even the quirkless, could be heroes and just wanted to save people from the goodness of his heart. But Rabbit? His motivations were an enigma to her. "Hey, Mr. Rabbit?" she asked, getting his attention as he passed her the water. "Why are you a vigilante? Why not become a hero?" Rabbit paused for a moment as he just stared at her. She could sense the unease rolling off of him at the question, but after a moment he replied, "A man murdered my father. The body was never found though, so when I did some digging I found out that the cops who told me and my mother were on his murder's payroll. That's the reason I'm here now, to find him and bring him to justice." He looked to Toru, whose sleeve was near where her mouth would be, most likely her hand covering said mouth. "And before you ask, yes, I did deal with the dirty cops too." "What did you do?" Despite not being able to see his face, she could still tell he had a massive sheet-eating grin. "I found out some secrets that they would rather not be made public and brought them to the light. After that they were arrested and sent to serve their sentences in prison." As for hero work, the vigilante shrugged. "It's a nice thought, but with how I am I doubt any school would take me." She was confused at that. Why would Dash? "Is there anything else you want to talk about?" he said. Though it wasn't in his voice, she could tell he was pleading with her to change the subject. Despite how much she wanted to push for answers, Toru respected his privacy and didn't push it, though there was still one question on her mind. Why Rabbit? That made him still, most likely remembering it. "Nope, sounds like what a try-hard NEET that flaunts their K/D would call themselves," Izuku said as he sat at the dining table and scribbled out another potential vigilante name. If he was going to do this, then he'd need a name to go by. So here he was, trying and failing to do so. But unbeknownst to him, a crusty man-child sitting in a bar sneezed and felt boiling anger for unknown reasons. Names were so much easier when I was a kid. Then he thought back to the potential hero names like All Might JR or Mighty Boing and cringed. "Actually, I think I just suck at names in general." "What are you up to, Izuku?" He was broken out of his thoughts when his mother approached him. He quietly flipped to a new page filled with gadgets that he may need. Just thinking up some support gadgets for when I become a hero." He stuttered with a smile, inside his head begging her to take his explanation at face value and to not look further into it. She looked between him and the book with a blank, unreadable face for a bit before giggling and ruffling his hair. "Well, good luck with that, my little rabbit," and with that went off into the kitchen, leaving Izuku to himself. Little rabbit? Rabbit? He thought to himself before his eyes lit up. Rabbit? That's it. He just thought up his vigilante name. The vigilante was just staring and saying nothing when she asked her question. Toru was getting a little nervous at the lack of movement, to the point where she was waving her bottle in front of his visor. "Rabbit?" she asked. "You okay?" Rabbit shook his head before looking at the invisible woman in front of him. "Sorry, what was your question again? Why did you call yourself Rabbit?" He was silent once more before speaking. Because of the ear's antenna, he pointed to said antenna on top of his helmet. "They look like rabbit ears, so I went with that." It sounds fake even to himself if he was going to be honest, but he refused to tell anyone that he got his name from his mom, let alone Toru, because if she ever found out about the reason he called himself Rabbit, she would tease him till his dying days, and he wasn't going to run that risk. Toru didn't believe Rabbit either, but left it alone. If he wanted to tell her what it was, then he would at some point. "Could I ask one more question?" "You just did," Rabbit joked before being playfully shoved by the woman. "But seriously, what do you want to talk about?" "It's my friend, Izuku," she said while twiddling her invisible thumbs. "He wants to be a hero as well. He's quirkless and I was wondering, could you teach him too?" Rabbit looked at her in silence, but underneath the helmet Izuku was smiling and trying to hold back tears. Despite them being friends, Izuku never expected her to ask his persona if he could train him with her. "As in Izuku Midoriya?" he asked, and when he saw her hairpin bobble up and down he knew she nodded. "I'm already training him on different days. If I had known you two were friends I would have told him to tell you." He was lucky that she bought this lie. "Really? That's great. I'm so happy for him," she yelled as she jumped up and down to show her emotions. Rabbit laughed at her as they continued to sit there and enjoy each other's company. Neither noticed two ravens looking down at them with warm looks in their eyes before they flew off. Another day, another giant villain trying to cause havoc. Empty Lady had this thought as she landed the final knockout punch to the villain she was fighting. The reason she was fighting this villain was because he was trying to destroy a local business that she later learned fired him for sexual harassment. When the villain shrank down to his original size, she sighed in relief that he was staying down, and now she could shrink down to her size, but a tug at the back of her collar stopped her. She felt movement on her shoulder, so she looked to her left and saw her favorite bunny-themed Vigilante trying to hide in some of her hair. Rabbit saw that she was looking at him and put a finger to where his mouth would be before hiding fully. She wanted to ask why he was hiding, but when she saw Death Arms and Kamui Woods on a roof looking around, she got the picture. "Hey boys," she called to them, grabbing their attention. "Who are you looking for?" "That damned Vigilante Rabbit. He gave us the slip with a smoke bomb," Death Arms grumbled. "Have you seen him?" She put a finger on her cheek, acting like she was trying to remember where he went before pointing out to a random direction. "I think I saw someone running that way on the rooftops. Couldn't get a good look, but it did look somewhat rabbit-shaped." "Good as any, I suppose," Kamui Woods sighed before running in the direction given. "Let's go, Death Arms." "Right." And with that the two ran off, completely unaware of what happened. Once they were out of sight, Rabbit sighed in relief before being plucked from the gigantic woman's hair and placed on the roof. She shrank down and stood in front of him while he sat down. "You good, Rabbit?" "Yeah, just let me catch my breath," he said, panting before giving her a weak thumbs up. "Thanks for the save. I owe you one." You just giggled at the Vigilante and snorted when he flopped to the floor like a rag doll. From the looks of him, he was running for a while now thanks to her friends. She sat on the ledge of the building they were on and watched as he caught his breath. After doing so, he jumped to his feet, now full of energy. "Better!" he yelled as he threw his in the air before he looked at the woman. "Though you probably sent your friends to their deaths." Lady tilted her head in confusion. "Why?" "You'll probably see them in the news tomorrow," Rabbit shrugged. "Or if they're lucky, you'll see them at the hospital." Now you was really worried about where she sent them, but was slightly at ease because she knew that the Vigilante would warn her if it was serious. But that did raise the question on why they were chasing after him. "Why were those two meatheads chasing after you?" "I was helping a friend out when they showed up," he explained. "Kamui wanted to go with the negotiation route and talk to me." Death Arms, on the other hand, charged right at you without thinking? She summarized with a blank face and evenly monotone voice. "Yep." Rabbit nodded, said that I embarrassed him or something. "I don't know, but after that we started running." You sighed at that. Death Arms was extremely salty later after the sludge villain that the Vigilante stole his thunder. Both her and Kamui Woods tried to calm him down, but he was just as set on capturing him as most. Before she could say anything else, Rabbit was nowhere to be seen other than a note sitting where he stood. Picking it up, she found a letter with a pamphlet to the best spa in Mizurufu. She opened the letter and it read, "Hey lady, I wanted to thank you for being one of the few to not try and bring me in, so as thanks I booked you a trip to this spa as thanks. For all I know this could be your birthday and it could be a present, so happy birthday if so. Sincerely, Rabbit." You smiled at the gift and pocketed it in a secret pocket in her costume and sent it to secure the villain that was still unconscious. Our top story. Yesterday, Pro Heroes Death Arms and Kamui Woods were hospitalized when they accidentally attacked Pro Hero Miruko. A video of the Rabbit hero beating the sheet out of the two heroes was displayed with the civilian who took the film's name in the bottom left. When questioned, they said that they were chasing the Vigilante known as Rabbit when they lost track of him. Later, after following directions given to them by MD, ladies saw Miruko and mistook her for the Vigilante. The video stopped and showed the reporter with her sitting behind a large desk. A man with a bison's head sat next to her and spoke to the camera. Miruko did give a statement to the authorities, but due to the crass language she used, we have elected to not repeat it. In other news, a family in Tokyo was found dead. "Geez, I feel sorry for Kamui and Death Arms," Toru commented, watching the news in the Midoriya's apartment while eating some toast. "But how can you mistake Miruko for Rabbit?" "Well, they're both rabbit-based, with one being a quirk and the other a costume. If she was going fast enough, it could be a trick of the light mistake," Izuku said as he ate his cereal next to her. "If I ever meet Miruko, I'm gonna have to apologize for that. If she doesn't try and kick my ass." "Maybe, but one is black and green while the other is in a white leotard with a dark purple trim, plus one is male and the other is female," she continued. Izuku just shrugged and continued eating his breakfast. When he saw Toru again, she all but barreled into him while excitedly talking about how they got the same trainer. He had to feign ignorance when she said it and act shocked when she revealed that she was training under Rabbit like him. Izuku had to suppress a chuckle when he remembered her jumping all around at having the opportunity to talk about Rabbit and his training. There was also a small amount of unexplainable jealousy at the way she was talking about how cool his persona was. He just shrugged it off for now, but it kept eating at him the more he listened. Luckily, his invisible friend moved the conversation along to possibly doing some light training together at some point. He didn't get why his heart would beat faster whenever he was around Toru, but no matter how hard he searched on the internet, he would come up empty. Maybe Hugan might know something about this, he thought to himself. He looked back at the news that was covering the murder of a family with their son missing. I'm also going to ask Hugan if she might know more about this too. Izuku was getting a bit antsy over the past few days as he hadn't heard anything from Midas on if he got in or not. He was so close now to avenging his father, but now everything was on his enemy if he got the chance. He looked at Toru and felt his heart speed up again. He was quite jealous of the way she could be so confident and not give a crap about how people perceived her. Izuku admired how she could show such energy while people tell you how useless you are, how she hasn't just given up because everyone tells you you couldn't do the thing you dream for. He knew that she got mocked in Aldra like he does, but for an entirely different reason. She was mocked for the fact that no one could see her and that she could never get a boyfriend like that. Izuku often wondered why Toru couldn't turn off her invisibility and came to a subconscious conclusion. If there was a god, then they made Toru invisible because no mortal man could handle such beauty. They made her invisible to give other women a chance to find love because she would steal other men's attention. He looked back at the TV unaware that his friend had gone stiff. He had just unconsciously muttered what he was thinking about her, and Toru heard everything. She felt her heartbeat quicken and her face exploding into a massive blush as her mind replayed what he said over and over again. Toru was honestly thankful for her invisibility right now so Izuku couldn't see the mess he unknowingly put her in. She didn't know how to feel about what he said because on one hand she wanted to tell him that he was being silly and joke that it was actually hiding her ugliness. On the other hand, she wanted to hug him till his spine broke while giving him the biggest kiss of their lives. Kiss him. That made her pause and reflect on what she just thought. She wanted to kiss her best friend for unknowingly saying that she was beautiful. She looked at him and saw how close they really were, how their hands were inches away from being held. She looked at his face. What some might call plain she would call an unfair combination of cute and handsome. His baggy clothes hid his muscles and some scars well. Toru knew how muscular he was under that shirt because she was sitting in his room wanting to surprise him. He came in without seeing her on his bed and changed his shirt because he accidentally spilled water on it. She almost lost all of her blood because it tried to escape through her nose, but luckily she managed to control it till she made it back to her room. She laid on her bedroom floor in a daze with the only coherent words she could utter, words hubba hubba, being repeated over and over again like a broken record. She wasn't blind to the fact that she had some feelings towards Izuku, but she never really knew how to bring it up. They were separated for years only for them to be reunited as teenagers, and now she starts crushing on him? It sounded like a bad fanfiction. Besides, why would he go for someone who he can't even see? Toru thought to herself, repeating the words she heard since she moved away and returned. What neither of them knew was that Inko was watching them from the kitchen and decided to help her betting chances. She activated her quirk on the seat cushion that Izuku was on and tipped him over so his head landed in Toru's lap. Izuku let out a startled yelp as he landed face first into his friend's soft thighs. Both of them blushed madly and tried separating from each other. Unfortunately for both, they tumbled onto the floor with Izuku landing on his back and Toru on top of him. Because of the collapse, his face was stuffed into her surprisingly soft chest, and her hand rested on his groin, causing her to unintentionally feel his length. This time they properly separated and couldn't look each other in the eye from the embarrassing situation. All the while Inko was dying from laughing too hard in the kitchen at the situation she just caused. It had now been a full week since he met the contract from Citadel, and now he was starting to get paranoid. Luckily Hugan comforted him and took him out to deal with villains and thugs to calm his nerves. Rabbit and Hugan had just finished beating up a bunch of thugs that were trying to sell Trigger and were now sitting on a nearby rooftop. They sat there with their helmets off eating some burgers while Munin ate some fries and just enjoyed each other's company. It was one of the rare times that Izuku got to see his friend without the helmet he made her. She had fair skin and ruby red eyes. She had short black hair that when she had her helmet off she preferred to style it to cover her right eye for some reason. Honestly, it was a nice change whenever he got to see her without her helmet, especially when he made her laugh. He found it hilarious the way she would silently clutch her stomach as she laughed at whatever stupid thing he did. though the two of them always found it amusing when they went into a fast food restaurant to order in full costume. So as they were stuffing their faces and enjoying their lunch when the distant sounds of police sirens caught their attention, donning their helmets they rushed after it and found themselves in front of the local mall surrounded by police and a few local heroes. Izuku looked over to Hugan, who was already at work trying to figure out what was happening. The holographic screen showed a live news broadcast where a woman was reporting. Police and local heroes have been trying to negotiate with the villains inside. The woman said, the group has taken shoppers and workers as hostages and won't let go until their demands are met. That was all they needed to hear before they sprang into action, quickly finding themselves on the roof of the building. Izuku opened a ventilation shaft and bowed while gesturing to the entrance. Ladies first. Such a gentleman, Hugan texted playfully before shoving him lightly into the vents. I ain't giving you a free viewing of my ass. Izuku chuckled, especially when Hugan turned into her bird form and she and Munin were catching a free ride on his back. As they crawled their way through, they came across an opening where two people were talking. Man, the first one groaned, I've been trying to get into One Piece lately but I just can't. Over 4,000 episodes. And it's still not even halfway done. I know what you mean, I got to where they met Brook and my computer decided to explode. The second complained, I don't even remember what episode that was either. I think that was episode 337, Rabbit said from behind them with Hugan nodding as she brought up the episode. Ah, thanks man. The second one thanked and stood in silence before the two realized the two behind them and spun around to attack. Hugan brought out her collapsible bow staff and brought it down on her opponent, whacking him in his jaw before swiping his feet from under him. Once he was on the ground, she gave a swift kick to his head to knock him out and tied his hands and legs in zip ties. Rabbit ducked under the punch and grabbed the guy's arm to swing him over their shoulder. The guy tumbled to the floor where Rabbit straddled him and held a knife to his throat. I'm gonna need some intelligence, Rabbit said while holding the blade closer. I don't have any intelligence. The man yelled, trying desperately to get out of the situation he now found himself in. Heh, Rabbit chuckled with Hugan silently giggling, you called yourself dumb? I am not dumb. The idiot roared, still trying to wiggle himself free. I bet your neck that you're not and that you know what's going on here, Rabbit threatened, his knife pressing a bit more on the thug's neck and drawing a bit of blood. So if you like living, I'd recommend telling us what you're doing here. Like I'd take a threat from a hero? And who said we're heroes? Hugan's text box appeared. The thug's eyes widened as he read it and looked at the two who beat him and his friend. Even with them wearing helmets, he could tell they had sadistic grins on their faces now that he came to one conclusion. Heroes are trained to restrain villains and prevent them from hurting civilians or themselves, but sadly some villains just won't stop and have to be ended to save lives. It is usually saved as a last resort when all other options have been depleted and it's either the villain or the civilian. Vigilantes don't tend to follow the same rules as heroes do. Swallowing the lump in his throat, the thug talked. We got word that a rich FA's daughter would be here. Our boss said that we'd take her captive and bargain for a boatload of cash. Who's the daughter and where is she? Rabbit growled. It's just some stupid rich girl. I don't know who she is. She's being separated from the others. He promptly told the two vigilantes where she and the others were and any important information. Rabbit decided to be merciful and knock the guy out quickly before zip-tying him too and shoving the two thugs into the janitor's closet. They knew that they had pistols to make up for their weak quirks and that the hostages were separated on either side of the mall. They agreed to split up, with Izuku going after the girl while Hugan and Munin attempt to free the other hostages. It was honestly quite unnerving that the mall was so quiet, but that is how it goes when a hostage situation is underway. A small part of him wondered if Edgeshot was somewhere here to find the hostages himself. He wandered around to where the thugs said where they were keeping the girl. Sure enough, on the second floor he found the three of them and hid around a corner to listen in on what they were saying. Hey boss? Do you really think it's a good idea to be doing this? One of them asked. As soon as we get our money, then we book it out of this country. Simply as that, the boss said. The second guy snickered while looking at the girl. Maybe we could have some fun with her before then. With those quirk suppression cuffs on her, she can't stop us. Just don't make a mess, the boss said with a grin. Having enough of what he was hearing, Rabbit came out of his hiding spot and unsheathed his sword. As he walked towards them, he let the tip of the blade rest on the ground, letting it scrape along the ground and catching their attention. "Hey guys. How's your health plan?" They raised their pistols and fired on Rabbit, but he quickly brought up his collapsible arm shield, letting the bullets ping off it. "Apparently it's great." Rabbit charged at them and bodied the first guy with his shield while quickly knocking the gun over the edge so it fell to the first. He tossed him with his glove taser before shooting him with the lock-up pellets. He quickly spun around and kicked the second guy into their boss. The leader of this opposition pushed the other guy off him and leapt onto Rabbit, causing both of them to tumble onto the floor and his sword away from them. The two rolled around trying to grapple each other before a gunshot was heard and the boss fell to the floor. On examination, there was blood coming from his waist, most likely being paralyzed. Looking up, Rabbit saw the third guy holding the gun with his hands shaking and a look of fear on his face. His eyes were glued to his boss, who was writhing in pain and didn't see the vigilante move. Rabbit picked up his sword and delivered a swift kick to the man's balls, causing him to fall to the ground like a sack of bricks. To make sure that he didn't get back up, he shot him with lockup. He also zip-tied their boss for extra good measure. Rabbit looked at the girl who had long black hair tied up into a spiky ponytail and onyx black eyes. Breaking the quirk suppression cuffs, he looked at her. "You okay, Ms.?" Momo Yayarozu said shakily. "Who are you?" "I'm the Vigilant Rabbit, and me and my friend Hugan are getting you and everyone out." He extended his hand to her and lifted her to her feet. "Let's get you all out of here." They eventually met up with Hugan and Munin, with the bird looking smug for some reason. His friend explained that one of the thugs had pinned her to the ground and Munin bit him on the D. Rabbit and Hugan brought everyone to the mall's entrance and safely escorted them out. Everyone rushed to their families or friends and they spotted Momo being hugged by her parents. Rabbit and Sidekick. "Put your hands where we can see them," one of the officers shouted over a megaphone, catching everyone's attention. "You are under arrest for illegal quirk usage and vigilantism." "Sidekick?" A giant text box appeared over Hugan as she stomped her foot in anger. Izuku snickered at her anger at being referred to as his sidekick. "I'm my own goddamn vigilante. Just stand down and come quietly," one of the heroes yelled. "They just saved my daughter's life." Yayarozu's father yelled at both the hero and police in anger. "They might be vigilantes, but they did more than what you did. And we can thank them when they're behind bars, sir," the hero said through gritted teeth. "Now stay behind the line and let us do our job." "Look, gentlemen, we'd love to stay and chat, but I'm afraid we'll have to decline," Rabbit said as he pulled out a black ball pellet from his pocket. "We'll have to dash, bye." And with that he threw the black pellet and made it release smoke, obscuring the vision of everyone. After the smoke cleared, the two vigilantes were gone and two ravens flying in the distance. In an alleyway not too far away, our two vigilantes rested after running as fast as they could to be as far away from the mall as possible. While Hugan did fly, it still drained her from the long flight and tried to locate where Rabbit had scarpered off to. They stood there catching their breath when a buzz came from a burner phone that Rabbit had. He took it out of his pocket and his eyes widened from under his helmet. "Everything good?" Hugan asked curiously. "It's Midas," Izuku revealed. "He just agreed to bring me to Citadel in 3 days' time." Before they could celebrate that he was now a step closer to accomplishing his goal, the sounds of footsteps coming from further in the alley, stumbling before going into a full run, a blonde girl came running out and threw a knife at Rabbit. Izuku brought out his shield and easily blocked the attack but couldn't stop the blonde girl from jumping on him. He felt a slight pain in his shoulder where she bit him and started drinking his blood. Thankfully, Hugan ripped the girl off him and threw her into the wall where she slumped down. The fellow vigilante helped him up as they took in the girl's appearance. She had blonde hair that was tied into two messy buns, sharp canine teeth like a vampire, and yellow slit eyes. The girl gripped her head and looked around in growing horror. "Oh God, I did it again," she muttered and started to shake. Rabbit and Hugan looked at each other before something clicked in Rabbit's head. Sharp canine teeth, drinking blood. "You have a blood quirk, don't you?" "I'm so sorry," she cried. "I didn't mean to lose control." "This seems like a case of quirk madness," Hugan texted. "You know how they're treated and oftentimes don't get the help they need." Rabbit walked slowly towards her and knelt down to her level. "What's your name, Miss?" Himiko Toga," she sniffed. "You got a place to go?" She shook her head. "What's your quirk?" Instead of answering, sludge surrounded her and she transformed into a perfect double of Izuku. She let her transformation go and the sludge poured off her skin. Izuku sighed and took off his helmet as she already knew his identity thanks to this and rubbed his face. We can't just leave her. I can't house her as there is no room in my home, Hugan shrugged. It's already packed with me, my brothers and my parents. Izuku sighed as he knew what he had to do and looked at Himiko. My name's Izuku Midoriya, how'd you like to come with me? Himiko was silent before bursting into tears and latched onto Izuku while crying into his shoulder. She eventually passed out from exhaustion, so taking a quick trip further into the alley, he changed into his civilian clothes and gave the sleeping Himiko a piggyback ride. Hugan and Izuku said their goodbye and were about to head off before one of Hugan's text boxes appeared before him. Izuku? He turned around to look at Hugan, who had her back to him and was trembling slightly. In 3 days' time you're going to be on the heart of Citadel, you're gonna finally get your revenge, and I'm not going to be there to help you, to watch out for you if things go wrong. She turned around to face him. I need you to promise me that if shit hits the fan that you will get help. I need to know that the person that I see as a brother will come back to me alive. Izuku walked up and after adjusting his hold on Himiko gave Hugan a one-armed hug, which she reciprocated. I promise to you, Hugan, I'll come back alive. They separated shortly after with Hugan giving one last advice. Don't be afraid to ask for help every once in a while, alright? Even from heroes. And with that she and Munin transformed and flew away with Izuku walking in the opposite direction. To say that things have gotten more lively in the Midoriya household now would be an understatement. When Izuku brought Toga back to his home, his mother was naturally worried about what had happened. When Himiko eventually woke up again, she explained fully on what had happened to her meeting Izuku in that alleyway. She explained how her parents had abused her for her quirk being villainous and how they tried to suppress her need for blood any way they could. She explained how she needed blood to survive just like everyone needs water and air. She told of the time when the suppression had reached its peak and she attacked a classmate. Her mother and father kicked her out of the house after and that she had been living on the streets ever since. Himiko also explained that she would usually break into blood banks to stop herself from going crazy. Sadly, sometimes she couldn't get to one in time and she'd black out until she's had her fill. This oftentimes led her to wake up over a freshly dead animal or in some cases an injured person. The night she attacked Izuku was one of those times, but was fortunate enough that they got her under control. Izuku let out a silent sigh of relief as she didn't mention that he was Rabbit and just said his name. He did ask her later why she didn't say he was Rabbit, and Himiko explained that she saw the panic in his eyes when she talked about the alley. Inko offered Himiko the guest bedroom and to stay the night until they figure out what they should do. When morning came, they decided to call the police and tell them the situation. As it turned out, there was already an invitation going on with the Togas about tax evasion. With Himiko's account of what their treatment was like, they quickly got a warrant for child abuse. Now with no real place to go and no family to call her own, Inko being the kind soul, she is asked if Himiko would like to join the Midoriya family. That afternoon, Himiko Midoriya celebrated her adoption with her new mother and brother. The blonde also became fast friends with Toru and would regularly hang out with each other. Sometimes Izuku would join, but the two females would just go out by themselves. Speaking of Toru, her training was coming along quite nicely in his opinion. Despite what she tells him, she is actually improving and getting closer to the plushie with every day that passes. He also started admitting to himself that he might have romantic feelings for his childhood friend but didn't know how to approach the topic. He had feelings for a friend that had been out of his life for a long time, and now that she was back it sounded ridiculous for him to develop a crush on her. Besides, she could do better, Izuku thought to himself as he hopped from rooftop to rooftop in his rabbit uniform. Why would she choose a quirkless freak like me anyway? Izuku decided to calm his nerves about meeting Midas tomorrow by taking out his stress on a few thugs that were trying to sell drugs to 13-year-olds. After making a call to the police while giving the drug dealers a final kick to the teeth, he jumped off to find anyone else to help. Honestly, it had been kinda slow today, and for the life of him he didn't know what was up. Usually when criminals went into hiding, it was because a top hero entered the area. There were still those that were ballsy enough to attempt to attack the hero, but to get this reaction was odd. The only time he'd seen something like this was when... Shit. Do that mean she's dash? Rabbit's thoughts had been cut off when a foot slammed into his back, causing him to careen into a nearby wall. He looked to his assailant and his suspension was proven correct while making him pale significantly. Standing in front of him was a dark-skinned woman with an athletic yet curvaceous figure, muscular arms and legs, red eyes, straight white hair that reached down past her waist, and on top of her head was a pair of long white rabbit ears. The rabbit hero, Miruko, was standing in front of him, and she looked absolutely pissed. Her fiery stare made him feel like an ant standing beneath a boot. "So, you're this rabbit guy I've been hearing so much about," Miruko growled, cracking her knuckles and neck while still glaring at the vigilante as he picked himself up. "I need to properly thank you for that trouble with those two idiots when they mistook me for you." "I didn't mean for them to attack you," Rabbit defended himself. "Besides, it was MT Lady who gave them the directions and it was their dumbass decision to attack first and not ask questions. I don't give a flying F who gave who directions. I just want to fight," Miruko yelled before getting into a combat stance. "Now, give me everything you've got." She launched herself at Rabbit with a speed that rivals even Ingenium. She spun in the air and was about to deliver an axe kick before the vigilante dodged. Rabbit rolled out of the way and swiped at her leg, but Miruko hopped out of the way. They both dashed at each other and moved to kick the other. Their legs clashed in the middle and stayed there as they fought for dominance over the other. The scene could only be described as an odd sort of arm wrestle but with their legs. They soon disengaged before Izuku's fist slammed into Miruko's sternum, but she retaliated back with a punch to the chin. Soon a flurry of kicks and punches were exchanged to each other, with Izuku having to dodge a lot of them lest he have his head separated from his body. Miruko lined up to deliver another kick, but Rabbit stopped this action by grabbing her by the leg and twisted his body to throw her over his shoulder. She caught herself before she could hit the ground and rolled a bit before kicking him in the ribs. The vigilante stumbled back a bit and brought out his shield to block a kick to his chest. After retracting his shield, he flipped over her and delivered a shot to her liver and ribs. The rabbit hero grinned as she saw a punch coming straight for her face and instead of counter-attacking blocked her face. She realized that it was just a distraction as his legs slammed into her side, and with the metal that covered them she was sure that she felt them break. She delivered a kick to his stomach and sending him flying. He landed in a crouched position similar to that of a rabbit. Now, with enough distance between the two, they started panting in exhaustion. Miruko looked at Rabbit with a wide feral grin. "You know, Bunny, you're not half bad." "Really?" Rabbit chuckled lightly and quietly hissed at his injuries. "That's high praise. I'm honored." "Too bad you're a vigilante. Could use someone with balls on the hero screen." Miruko shrugged and sighed. "I'd love to continue fighting you for the rest of my career." "Yeah, but I'd prefer to keep my head where it is, thanks," Izuku said before he heard a beep. He looked to his right arm and saw there was a message on the screen. "Mom, hi Izuku. Sorry to bother you right now, but do you think you could get some pork for me? I'm making katsudon and wear out." With the prospect of his favorite food on the table, Izuku looked to the rabbit hero. "Sorry to cut this short, but I have to go now." "Like hell you're leaving?" Miruko yelled. "The fight was just getting good." "Sorry, but I gotta bounce." Miruko jumped at him to stop him from trying to escape. Rabbit pulled out his gun and shot her with lockup. "It'll last for an hour, any longer than I'd consider calling a doctor about it." He walked to the edge of the roof before looking over his shoulder to her. "Maybe next time we could finish this fight?" With that, he left the rabbit hero on that roof and went off to get the item his mother asked for. She looked at where Rabbit jumped off to and grinned to herself. "Oh, I like him," she said, "and I'll hold you to that rematch." Izuku walked through the streets in his Akatani Mikumo disguise because he was going to the location of where to meet to be taken to Citadel. If he was being honest with himself, he was as nervous as the day he first started being a vigilante. Izuku shook his head to clear his thoughts as he had just arrived at the location. It was an old and dilapidated boat shed near the outskirts of Toga Municipal Beach. Taking a deep breath, he knocked on the door in a pattern to signify that if the person he was supposed to meet was there, they would know he was there. Seconds felt like an eternity as Izuku stood there watching the old door, and felt his mind racing with possibles that they'd figured him out. He was knocked out of his thoughts as the door slowly and crackly opened to reveal the one he was supposed to meet. He was a skinny, tall man with sickly pale skin and raven black hair that faded into purple tips. His scara were black and that made his purple eyes almost glow. He wore a long black cloak with red highlights that had a hood attached. Underneath was a black vest, a white dress shirt underneath and a red tie. dark gray dress pants and black shoes. The man stared at Izuku with a neutral expression, but his piercing purple eyes seemed to be staring straight into his soul. He felt some sweat drip from his forehead from the intense gaze before the man spoke in a soft, wispy but emotionless tone. "Are you Akatani Mikumo?" Izuku nodded in confirmation, hiding the slight shiver he felt from the man's voice. "Then step inside, we will depart soon." Izuku nodded and stepped inside while the man closed the door behind him. He turned to the Citadel member and asked, "If it's not too much trouble, who are you?" The man hummed for a moment, seeming to be contemplating the request before speaking. "You may call me Sharon." On the outside, Izuku retained a neutral expression and nodded at the Citadel member, but on the inside he was screaming as standing right in front of him was Midas's right-hand man. Sharon waved his hand over the water and shadows sprung from his hand, forming a shape that hovered above the water. After a moment, a gondola made of shadows that absorbed all light floated in front of him and above the water. The cloaked man stepped onto the back of the boat and grabbed his, "You may step aboard now, sir." Once Izuku got in and sat down, the boat jerked forward and started moving. "I would recommend that you do not fall off when we get going." "Why?" "Unless you'd like to end up dead, then I'd stay put." The disguised vigilante yelped in surprise, and before he could demand what he meant, everything in his vision went black. The only thing he could see was himself, Sharon, and the boat. It still felt like he was moving, and the boat rocked like it was sailing through water. Izuku turned back to the villain and asked what was going on. "We are traveling through my quirk," Sharon said simply. "Through this boat that I summon, we travel through shadows to our destination." "Then what about the whole falling off equals death thing from earlier? If you fall off my boat, you will reappear in the normal world, but burnt and scarred almost beyond recognition," the ferryman said while he continued rowing with a long stick. "I do not know of what happens before death, but from what I know, their eyes and faces are always ones of abject terror." Izuku silently swallowed a lump that gathered in his throat and remained silent for the rest of the voyage. Though to be fair, said voyage was relatively short, as only 2 minutes had passed by before his eyes were assaulted by light one more. He didn't really have a frame of reference for how big the area was, but the word massive would do for now, surrounding the area where tall walls easily dwarfed some of the buildings except for one. Sharon pointed to a large building that was nearby. "That is the meeting place for our leader. We are heading there now." Nodding, Izuku walked with the villain as he continued to analyze the area further. People of Citadel walked everywhere and had places to be. In buildings was the sound of machines slaving away to make support gear for either themselves or other villains. Looking up, Izuku noticed that the sun was shining brightly in the sky and support beams held the glass high in the air. Well, he thought it was glass until the sun glitched before showing an error screen. It eventually rebooted to show the sun once more, but by then Izuku already figured out that the sky was fake and was in fact a bunch of monitors. The question is why? Why show a fake sky? Sadly, he didn't have much time to continue pondering because they reached the entrance to the skyscraper. They entered the lobby and then some nearby elevators. Sharon chose the top floor and they ascended up to the top floor. The elevator had a window to see the outside, and it was because of this that Izuku got a lay of the land. The entire place was a circle, and the building he was currently in was positioned smack in the middle of the whole thing. There were massive water pumps and air compressors near the north, east, and west from where he could see, and could only assume that there was one in the south. Despite having a different layout, the place reminded him of some images he saw of Island. With a ding, the elevator stopped and the doors opened to reveal a man as tall as All Might and just as muscular. He has short crimson hair, orange eyes, and scars adorned his arms from the elbow to just above his wrists. He was wearing black combat boots, olive green combat pants, and a white tank top. "Ares, good afternoon," Sharon greeted. "I did not expect you to be here. You're usually absent from these types of things." "Had no choice. The boss wanted me here," the man now revealed as Ares said. He looked at Izuku and quirked an eyebrow. "This the new blood?" "Indeed he is. Mikumo, meet Ares," the hooded man introduced before turning back to Ares. "Do we know if Morpheus and Demeter will be joining us today?" The brute of a man shrugged his shoulders in a nonchalant manner. Just then another elevator dinged and out stepped a woman who had short rusty red hair with a fringe that covered her left eye, soft green skin, sapphire blue sclera and red eyes, and her right arm is a conglomerate of green vine tendrils. She wore a black crop leather jacket with a white t-shirt underneath with the right sleeves ripped to accommodate for her vine arm. tan pants and black knee-high boots. She looked at the fellow Citadel member and a large sharp-toothed smile stretched across her lips. "What's up, F-airs?" she yelled as she threw her arms to the side. "Demeter," Sharon said as he ignored her rather crass greeting. Ares on the other hand grinned back and fist-bumped her. "This is Mikumo, he's our new recruit." Demeter came over and inspected Izuku top to bottom while circling him like a shark that just found its meal. She stopped in front of his face and leaned in to the point that their noses almost touched. Izuku gulped as she glared into his very soul before she grinned at him. "You're cute." W. Izuku scratched as his face exploded into a blush, causing Demeter to fall on her back and laugh like a hyena. Ares joined her as he too doubled over laughing. Sharon sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Children, the lot of you," he muttered before looking at Izuku. "Please forget her, Mikumo. Her intelligence is, for a lack of a better term, like the old DVD logo that bounces around the screen, and only when it hits the corner is she capable of intelligent thought." "Hey!" Before anything else could be said, a door opened and a woman stepped out. She had mint green slit eyes, long dark teal hair tied into a ponytail and snake-like scales around her face. She was wearing a dark gray double-breasted suit with an olive green dress shirt underneath, a black tie, dark gray skirt, black leggings and black boots. "Midas is ready for you," the woman said with a small bow, when she spoke when Izuku saw that she had sharp fangs. "Thank you, Morpheus," Sharon said as the woman, Morpheus, nodded and they all headed inside. Inside the room sat the man that started Izuku down this path, the man that took his father away from him and his mother. Sitting behind a wooden mahogany desk and on an ornate wooden chair sat Midas. He had short dark blonde hair, golden yellow eyes and light beard stubble on his face. He wore a white suit, a black tie hung from his neck over a yellow dress shirt, a red spider lily attached to his left lapel, black dress pants, white dress shoes and black artist gloves covering his hands. He looked at Izuku before giving him a smile that one would give to hide your intentions and gestured to a chair in front of his desk. "You must be Akatani Mikumo. Please have a seat and we may begin." Izuku had to resist the urge to glare at the man and shoot him in the head. Fortunately, he didn't have any weapon to use yet, and he hid his hatred for the man well as he sat down opposite to him. Sharon and Demeter took to Midas's sides while Morpheus and Ares stood behind Izuku. He knew what they were doing as he expected to be wary of him until they could trust him. "I have to say, boy, you've impressed me with your quirk," Midas began as he interlocked his fingers together and rested them on his desk. "Not just anyone could guess my quirk like that, though it did say that you had to look at someone to analyze them." Izuku cursed himself inside his head at the slip-up but remained strong. "That wasn't me using my quirk, sir. Just general knowledge of myth and noticing how the contact reacted." The blonde raised an eyebrow at Izuku's words and leaned back in his chair while still keeping eye contact with Izuku. He reached for a drawer in his desk and pulled it open before retrieving a single yen coin. "How about we play a little game then, and something I've always wanted to try. I toss this coin and you have to guess which hand the coin is in," Midas said as he tossed the coin up before catching it again. "Sound interesting?" "What's the catch?" Izuku raised an eyebrow. This was surprisingly easy, so there had to be a catch. "Maybe I have to do it in a time limit?" Eyes closed. "No catch, just a simple coin toss," the blonde said simply. "You said that you weren't using your quirk. This time I want to see it in action." Midas stood from his chair and tossed the coin, but as soon as it came back down to chest level his hands moved at speeds that would make most speed quirk users jealous. They were moving so fast that they became a blur, and to most it was nigh impossible to keep up as she passed the coin from hand to hand. He eventually stopped and held out his closed fists. His expression was neutral and Izuku looked at the man's hands to make his choice. Left. The others looked at Midas expectantly and saw him lift an eyebrow. He opened his hands and in his left hand was the yen coin. "Good guess, let's kick it up a notch." Stepping forward, Sharon took Midas's left while Demeter took his right, and once they were in place Midas repeated the action with the two Citadel members joining in. Demeter used all her vines while Sharon used his left hand. They kept up with their leader's speed surprisingly well. They stopped and held out their fists as well. Izuku was silent for a moment before lifting his hand to point, only to jab his thumb behind him with a smirk. "Ares, right hand." Silence fell in the room once more as Ares opened his right hand and tossed the coin back to his leader. Midas matched Izuku's smirk and slowly clapped. Well done, very well done. Before he sat back down, he tossed Izuku the coin. Welcome to Citadel Mikomo. Starting next week you'll meet Sharon at the location you were given and start work. What about school? I still have to attend, Izuku said. Really, it was just so he could still see Toru. That is why you will only come here on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, the boss continued. On Monday you're going to be training with Ares. Wednesdays you'll be analyzing the members of Citadel and come up with ways they could improve, and finally on Fridays you'll be taking over what Akiharu Akinasuke used to do. If I remember correctly, he said something about being a caretaker for brats. Do they bring their children with them and want me to babysit them? Izuku thought to himself before speaking. I'll strive to make Citadel proud, Midas, sir. I'm sure you will, Midas grinned before gesturing to Sharon. Take him back home and return back to me. We still have business to attend to. With a nod, Sharon led Izuku back outside and summoned his boat to take Izuku back to the boat shed. Saying his goodbye to the ferryman, Izuku walked off back home with a single thought in his head: one step closer. On the rooftops of Mizudafu in the depths of night, a single person was standing on a...
Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.